through accelerators or incubators or mentorships. If you are super passionate about building something, doesn't matter if you're from Iowa or from Silicon Valley, you signed on the dotted line, you deserve that opportunity as well.
It's no secret that the democratic system is in crisis. When it comes to legislation and policy, it's hard to know what's actually going on behind closed doors. We don't have access to the information that actually impacts us on a daily basis.
So for communities and for advocacy organizations, it's that much harder for them to gain access to these policies.
Civic Eagles is a technology company on a mission to democratize information around legislation policies here in the United States.
Were we typical founders?
Hell no. There was nobody that looked like us. 2 Nigerian immigrants starting the company in Minnesota.
With Google for Startups, Immersion for Black Founders, we reimagined the product we're building into a B2B model.
And we get our first investor check. We're working with organizations that are helping solve the problems of immigration, and they're using our software to do that.
At Civic Eagle, we're not only building a successful business,
we're also creating incredible social impact.
My vision for Hong Kong is to be a global hub for entrepreneurs. Hardware manufacturing is a black box, and there are only a handful of women in hardware. Can we change that?
I'm the co-founder of 3DNA, and we're building vertical technology for eye care providers to offer bespoke, tailor-made glasses.
The 982 Express program offers women in hardware the best network of resources, from capital to distributors and manufacturers.
One big challenge of hardware is how much capital it requires and how much time it requires. We're really just looking at new ideas, new sources of information that could move us along.
Believe in yourself, back yourself, trust your judgment.
It's the first time I'm surrounded by female founders as well as hardware founders. And I think those 2 factors together made the program like a very valuable experience.
Our highest goal would be to be the landing spot for women around the world who want to build hardware.
The majority of gyms and fitness studios are small businesses. That's really where the heart of the industry lies. Since they don't have a ton of marketing budget, it was hard for them to get in front of new users. That's where ClassPass comes in. ClassPass connects people to fitness studios all around the globe, all through our app. We use Google Analytics 360 for everything in marketing. As a startup, every marketing dollar counts, and measurement is critical. If we're running an out-of-home ferry ad or a local news piece, we'll use Google Analytics 360 to track the impact in terms of traffic and conversions. It's how we understand exactly how our customers move through our website and book classes. Knowing the numbers down to a science and knowing the impact that small tests will have can be astronomical. If we're able to increase our site conversion rate by even 0.1%, that means thousands of new users that we're able to send to studio partners. We're giving studio owners time back to do what they're passionate about.
I grew up in a place where I didn't know there were more options than what existed. I'm 4th generation Mexican-American, farm labor. My parents, they spent most of their lives in the fields, and then of course my grandparents spent their entire lives in the fields. How does the son or daughter of a migrant farm worker really become a computer programmer? In underdog cities across the United States, you have to have a place where you can point to and say, this is where you come. That's why we started Bitwise. We teach people to code, we buy blighted properties in our downtown, rehab them, and lease them back out to the technology industry, and then we build software and software companies. Our business is 100% powered by Google products. We use analytics to understand how people are interacting with us, and we've seen traffic increase by 20%. We've added 2,000 tech jobs. That's families with groceries on the table, gas in the tank, but it's also hopefulness. What Bitwise can do best is set that new expectation that you can make this happen for you and your family for generations to come.
Every year in the United States, businesses waste 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food. And at the same time, we have 41 million people in this country that are gonna go to bed hungry tonight. That is a huge value of food that is just going to waste. That was the impetus behind Gooder. Gooder is an app. We inventory the food a business sells. When they are closing, they request a pickup. One of our do-gooders, using Google Maps API, gets it delivered to a nonprofit, preventing the food from going to waste. Google Maps helps reduce our carbon footprint by having our drivers take the most efficient routes.
What Gooder has done for ATL has been absolutely phenomenal. A community that eats better is a stronger community.
Gooder is approaching over 2 million pounds of edible surplus food that we've diverted from landfills. And this has accounted for almost 1.7 million meals to people in need. Gooder has built technology to solve a real-world problem. Businesses can do well by doing good, or doing gooder.
Parents talk constantly about their kids' schools. Parents love to gossip. I should know, I'm a parent and was a middle school math teacher, but parents had one set of information, schools had another set of information, and they weren't talking to each other. I decided to change that. POSIP prompts parents for weekly feedback and turns that parent engagement into data that schools use to track trends, solve problems, and bring joy to teachers and parents. Being a founder of color here in Nashville, I didn't see myself as a typical Silicon Valley founder. I am based out of a Google for Startups tech hub. That's how I found out about their Black Founders Immersion program, which led me to Founder Gym. It gave me a community of other founders who, like me, had an idea that they were looking to bring into the world. We went from 7 school partners to 75 school partners and 33,000 parents in our platform. The impact is changing the mindsets and the culture of schools. When we can get parents and teachers talking to each other, we get a little closer to making a better future for our kids.
Back in 2012, our salon had been open for a decade and a half.
Stylists and barbers were no longer wanting to sign long-term contracts. They wanted to be their own bosses.
What that looked like to us was empty chairs. Salon owners around the country, around the world actually, have that same issue. We're not able to keep our small business open. That's how ShareShare was born. The first mobile app that connects salon and barbershop owners to individual stylists to fill their empty salon space by the day. We knew that we weren't the typical startup founder.
Going into investors' offices, I'm not a white man.
We don't live in the Valley.
We are definitely proud Texans, Lone Star all the way. Google for Startups took us to the next level.
They get you to the right people at the right time. Because of Google Demo Day, we received $500,000 in capital. Somebody sees what we're trying to do.
Validation.
And it's the validation that comes with that.
Now, we're in over 460 cities and 11 countries.
We were just trying to fill an empty chair in our own salon.
To think of a problem you're solving for yourself and then you're helping other small business owners, it doesn't get any better than that.
The world needs startups because humans are evolving. Our world is evolving.
We want to help startups succeed in their business goals. They just have to focus on delivering their best work possible, and we take care of everything else.
We share a kinship with other ecosystem builders. We invest a lot of hard work, whether it be helping companies start or connecting them to opportunities or relationships.
We're not doing this because we think we're going to make a lot of money. We're doing it because we think we should give opportunity to people regardless of where they come from.
There's a huge emotional impact on the startups that we are fortunate enough to serve, and that really revolves around them oftentimes being seen for the very first time.
We don't view ourselves as investors who just invest in entrepreneurs. We view ourselves as evangelists, supporters, cheerleaders.
Every startup that comes through our door will ask them, where's your market? Where do you want to go? And what we really want to hear is, we want to impact the world.
Startup ecosystem builders raise a platform for us as a company to be entrepreneurial,
solve problems,
drive growth,
literally change the world.
The success of our business is really a testament to the support that we've been provided. And I think when you look at the collective effort of all of our parts, like, who knows what we can make this.
Right now, we're in the midst of one of the greatest shortages of healthcare workers, with a booming population of folks who increasingly need their expertise. At Care Academy, we provide online professional development for caregivers of older adults. I attended a 2-week program for female founders through Google for Startups, and they invited me back for their pitch competition. My online classes for caregivers. I always call Google Demo Day the most impactful 6 minutes we've experienced as a company. It gave us exposure at a moment that we really needed it, and we ended up oversubscribing on our first fundraising round. Care Academy is now available in all 50 states. We started out with maybe a couple dozen caregivers to now over 50,000. We'd love to see how we move into 500,000 caregivers, 5 million caregivers, and really grow the industry here in the US and abroad. We believe we can build that kind of healthcare future where we're empowering even more people outside of the 4 walls of the hospital to really help older adults who need care.
My name is Carson, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of FanFood, an app that's supporting events to order concessions for express pickup. Joining the military enabled me to be a leader. Things that I've learned in the military, like how to plan in uncertain environments, how to adapt, it's kind of entrepreneurship 101.
Coming from the Midwest as a first-time founder, fundraising, finding and hiring tech talent, these were all things I didn't know how to do. And that's where Bunker Labs came in.
Bunker Labs and Google for Startups support military veteran founders. They help out through accelerators or incubators or mentorships. If you are super passionate about building something, doesn't matter if you're from Iowa or from Silicon Valley, you signed on the dotted line, you deserve that opportunity as well.
It's no secret that the democratic system is in crisis. When it comes to legislation and policy, it's hard to know what's actually going on behind closed doors. We don't have access to the information that actually impacts us on a daily basis.
So for communities and for advocacy organizations, it's that much harder for them to gain access to these policies.
Civic Eagle is a technology company on a mission to democratize information around legislation policies here in the United States.
Were we typical founders?
Hell no. There was nobody that looked like us. 2 Nigerian immigrants starting the company in Minnesota.
With Google for Startups, Immersion for Black Founders, we reimagined the product we're building into a B2B model.
And we get our first investor check. We're working with organizations that are helping solve the problems of immigration, and they're using our software to do that.
At Civic Eagle, we're not only building a successful business,
we're also creating incredible social impact.
My vision for Hong Kong is to be a global hub for entrepreneurs. Hardware manufacturing is a black box, and there are only a handful of women in hardware. Can we change that?
I'm the co-founder of 3DNA, and we're building vertical technology for eye care providers to offer bespoke, tailor-made glasses.
The 982 Express program offers women in hardware the best network of resources, from capital to distributors and manufacturers.
One big challenge of hardware is how much capital it requires and how much time it requires. We're really just looking at new ideas, new sources of information that could move us along.
Believe in yourself, back yourself, trust your judgment.
It's the first time I'm surrounded by female founders as well as hardware founders. And I think those 2 factors together made the program like a very valuable experience.
Our highest goal would be to be the landing spot for women around the world who want to build hardware.
The majority of gyms and fitness studios are small businesses. That's really where the heart of the industry lies. Since they don't have a ton of marketing budget, it was hard for them to get in front of new users. That's where ClassPass comes in. ClassPass connects people to fitness studios all around the globe, all through our app. We use Google Analytics 360 for everything in marketing. As a startup, every marketing dollar counts, and measurement is critical. If we're running an out-of-home ferry ad or a local news piece, we'll use Google Analytics 360 to track the impact in terms of traffic and conversions. It's how we understand exactly how our customers move through our website and book classes. Knowing the numbers down to a science and knowing the impact that small tests will have can be astronomical. If we're able to increase our site conversion rate by even 0.1%, that means thousands of new users that we're able to send to studio partners. We're giving studio owners time back to do what they're passionate about.
I grew up in a place where I didn't know there were more options than what existed. I'm fourth generation Mexican-American, farm labor. My parents, they spent most of their lives in the fields, and then of course my grandparents spent their entire lives in the fields. How does the son or daughter of a migrant farm worker really become a computer programmer? In underdog cities across the United States, you have to have a place where you can point to and say, this is where you come. That's why we started Bitwise. We teach people to code, we buy blighted properties in our downtown, rehab them, and lease them back out to the technology industry, and then we build software and software companies. Our business is 100% powered by Google products. We use analytics to understand how people are interacting with us. We've seen traffic increase by 20%. We've added 2,000 tech jobs. That's families with groceries on the table, gas in the tank, but it's also hopefulness. What Bitwise can do best is set that new expectation that you can make this happen for you and your family for generations to come.
Every year in the United States, businesses waste 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food. And at the same time, you have 41 million people in this country that are gonna go to bed hungry tonight. That is a huge value of food that is just going to waste. That was the impetus behind Gooder. Gooder is an app. We inventory the food a business sells. When they are closing, they request a pickup. One of our do-gooders, using Google Maps API, gets it delivered to a nonprofit, preventing the food from going to waste. Google Maps helps reduce our carbon footprint by having our drivers take the most efficient routes.
What Gooder has done for ATL has been absolutely phenomenal. A community that eats better is a stronger community.
Gooder is approaching over 2 million pounds of edible surplus food that we've diverted from landfills. And this has accounted for almost 1.7 million meals to people in need. Gooder has built technology to solve a real-world problem. Businesses can do well by doing good or doing gooder.
Parents talk constantly about their kids' schools. Parents love to gossip. I should know, I'm a parent and was a middle school math teacher, but parents had one set of information, schools had another set of information, and they weren't talking to each other. I decided to change that. POSIP prompts parents for weekly feedback and turns that parent engagement into data that schools use to track trends, solve problems, and bring joy to teachers and parents. Being a founder of color here in Nashville, I didn't see myself as a typical Silicon Valley founder. I am based out of a Google for Startups tech hub. That's how I found out about their Black Founders Immersion program, which led me to Founder Gym. It gave me a community of other founders who, like me, had an idea that they were looking to bring into the world. We went from 7 school partners to 75 school partners and 33,000 parents in our platform. The impact is changing the mindsets and the culture of schools. When we can get parents and teachers talking to each other, we get a little closer to making a better future for our kids.
Back in 2012, our salon had been open for a decade and a half.
Stylists and barbers were no longer wanting to sign long-term contracts. They wanted to be their own bosses.
What that looked like to us was empty chairs. Salon owners around the country, around the world actually, have that same issue. We're not able to keep our small business open. That's how ShearShare was born. The first mobile app that connects salon and barbershop owners to individual stylists to fill their empty salon space by the day. We knew that we weren't the typical startup founder.
Going into investors' offices, I'm not a white man.
We don't live in the Valley.
We are definitely proud Texans, Lone Star all the way. Google for Startups took us to the next level.
We get you to the right people at the right time. Because of Google Demo Day, we received $500,000 in capital. Somebody sees what we're trying to do.
Validation.
And it's the validation that comes with that.
Now, we're in over 460 cities and 11 countries.
We were just trying to fill an empty chair in our own salon.
To think of a problem you're solving for yourself and then you're helping other small business owners, it doesn't get any better than that.
The world needs startups because humans are evolving. Our world is evolving.
We want to help startups succeed in their business goals. They just have to focus on delivering their best work possible, and we take care of everything else.
We share a kinship with other ecosystem builders. We invest a lot of hard work, whether it be helping companies start or connecting them to opportunities or relationships.
We're not doing this because we think we're going to make a lot of money. We're doing it because we think we should give opportunity to people regardless of where they come from.
There's a huge emotional impact on the startups that we are fortunate enough to serve, and that really revolves around them oftentimes being seen for the very first time.
We don't view ourselves as investors who just invest in entrepreneurs. We view ourselves as evangelists, supporters, cheerleaders.
Every startup that comes through our door, we'll ask them, where's your market? Where do you want to go? What we really want to hear is, we want to impact the world.
Startup ecosystem builders raise a platform for us as a company to be entrepreneurial,
solve problems,
drive growth,
literally change the world.
The success of our business is really a testament to the support that we've been provided. And I think when you look at the collective effort of all of our parts, like, who knows what we can make this.
Right now, we're in the midst of one of the greatest shortages of healthcare workers, with a booming population of folks who increasingly need their expertise. At Care Academy, we provide online professional development for caregivers of older adults. I attended a 2-week program for female founders through Google for Startups, and they invited me back for their pitch competition. Online classes for caregivers. I always call Google Demo Day the most impactful 6 minutes we've experienced as a company. It gave us exposure at a moment that we really needed it, and we ended up oversubscribing on our first fundraising round. Care Academy is now available in all 50 states. We started out with maybe a couple dozen caregivers to now over 50,000. We'd love to see how we move into 500,000 caregivers, 5 million caregivers, and really grow the industry here in the US and abroad. We believe we can build that kind of healthcare future where we're empowering even more people outside of the 4 walls of the hospital to really help older adults who need care.
My name is Carson, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of FanFood, an app that's supporting events to order concessions for express pickup. Joining the military enabled me to be a leader. Things that I've learned in the military, like how to plan in uncertain environments, how to adapt, is kind of entrepreneurship 101. Coming from the Midwest as a first-time founder, fundraising, finding and hiring tech talent, these are all things I didn't know how to do. And that's where Bunker Labs came in. Bunker Labs and Google for Startups support military veteran founders. They help out through accelerators or incubators or mentorships. If you are super passionate about building something, doesn't matter if you're from Iowa or from Silicon Valley, you signed on the dotted line, you deserve that opportunity as well.
It's no secret that the democratic system is in crisis. When it comes to legislation and policy, it's hard to know what's actually going on behind closed doors. We don't have access to the information that actually impacts us on a daily basis.
So for communities and for advocacy organizations, it's that much harder for them to gain access to these policies.
Civic Eagle is a technology company on a mission to democratize information around legislation policies here in the United States.
Were we typical founders?
Hell no. There was nobody that looked like us. 2 Nigerian immigrants starting the company in Minnesota.
With Google for Startups, Immersion for Black Founders, we reimagined the product we're building into a B2B model.
And we get our first investor check. We're working with organizations that are helping solve the problems of immigration, and they're using our software to do that.
At Civic Eagle, we're not only building a successful business,
we're also creating incredible social impact.
My vision for Hong Kong is to be a global hub for entrepreneurs. Hardware manufacturing is a black box, and there are only a handful of women in hardware. Can we change that?
I'm the co-founder of 3DNA. And we're building vertical technology for eye care providers to offer bespoke, tailor-made glasses.
The 982 Express program offers women in hardware the best network of resources, from capital to distributors and manufacturers.
One big challenge of hardware is how much capital it requires and how much time it requires. We're really just looking at new ideas, new sources of information that could move us along.
Believe in yourself, back yourself, trust your judgment.
It's the first time I'm surrounded by female founders as well as hardware founders. And I think those two factors together made the program like a very valuable experience.
Our highest goal would be to be the landing spot for women around the world who want to build hardware.
The majority of gyms and fitness studios are small businesses. That's really where the heart of the industry lies. Since they don't have a ton of marketing budget, it was hard for them to get in front of new users. That's where ClassPass comes in. ClassPass connects people to fitness studios all around the globe, all through our app. We use Google Analytics 360 for everything in marketing. As a startup, every marketing dollar counts, and measurement is critical. If we're running an out-of-home ferry ad or a local news piece, we'll use Google Analytics 360 to track the impact in terms of traffic and conversions. It's how we understand exactly how our customers move through our website and book classes. Knowing the numbers down to a science and knowing the impact that small tests will have can be astronomical. If we're able to increase our site conversion rate by even 0.1%, that means thousands of new users that we're able to send to studio partners. We're giving studio owners time back to do what they're passionate about.
I grew up in a place where I didn't know there were more options than what existed. I'm fourth generation Mexican-American, farm labor. My parents, they spent most of their lives in the fields, and then of course my grandparents spent their entire lives in the fields. How does the son or daughter of a migrant farm worker really become a computer programmer? In underdog cities across the United States, you have to have a place where you can point to and say, this is where you come. That's why we started Bitwise. We teach people to code, we buy blighted properties in our downtown, rehab them, and lease them back out to the technology industry, and then we build software and software companies. Our business is 100% powered by Google products. We use analytics to understand how people are interacting with us. We've seen traffic increase by 20%. We've added 2,000 tech jobs. That's families with groceries on the table, gas in the tank, but it's also hopefulness. What Bitwise can do best is set that new expectation that you can make this happen for you and your family for generations to come.
Every year in the United States, businesses waste 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food. And at the same time, you have 41 million people in this country that are gonna go to bed hungry tonight. That is a huge value of food that is just going to waste. That was the impetus behind Gooder. Gooder is an app. We inventory the food a business sells. When they are closing, they request a pickup. One of our do-gooders, using Google Maps API, gets it delivered to a nonprofit preventing the food from going to waste. Google Maps helps reduce our carbon footprint by having our drivers take the most efficient routes.
What Gooder has done for ATL has been absolutely phenomenal. A community that eats better is a stronger community.
Gooder is approaching over 2 million pounds of edible surplus food that we've diverted from landfills. And this has accounted for almost 1.7 million meals to people in need. Gooder has built technology to solve a real-world problem. Businesses can do well by doing good or doing gooder.
Parents talk constantly about their kids' schools. Parents love to gossip. I should know, I'm a parent and was a middle school math teacher, but parents had one set of information, schools had another set of information, and they weren't talking to each other. I decided to change that. POSIP prompts parents for weekly feedback and turns that parent engagement into data that schools use to track trends, solve problems, and bring joy to teachers and parents. Being a founder of color here in Nashville, I didn't see myself as a typical Silicon Valley founder. I am based out of a Google for Startups tech hub. That's how I found out about their Black Founders Immersion program, which led me to Founder Gym. It gave me a community of other founders who, like me, had an idea that they were looking to bring into the world. We went from 7 school partners to 75 school partners and 33,000 parents in our platform. The impact is changing the mindsets and the culture of schools. When we can get parents and teachers talking to each other, we get a little closer to making a better future for our kids.
Back in 2012, our salon had been open for a decade and a half.
Stylists and barbers were no longer wanting to sign long-term contracts. They wanted to be their own bosses.
What that looked like to us was empty chairs. Salon owners around the country, around the world actually, have that same issue. We're not able to keep our small business open. That's how ShareShare was born. The first mobile app that connects salon and barbershop owners to individual stylists to fill their empty salon space by the day. We knew that we weren't the typical startup founder.
Going into investors' offices, I'm not a white man.
We don't live in the Valley.
We are definitely proud Texans, Lone Star all the way. Google for Startups took us to the next level.
They get you to the right people at the right time. Because of Google Demo Day, we received $500,000 in capital. Somebody sees what we're trying to do.
Validation.
And it's the validation that comes with that.
Now, we're in over 460 cities and 11 countries.
We were just trying to fill an empty chair in our own salon.
To think of a problem you're solving for yourself and then you're helping other small business owners, it doesn't get any better than that.
The world needs startups because humans are evolving. Our world is evolving.
We want to help startups succeed in their business goals. They just have to focus on delivering their best work possible, and we take care of everything else.
We share a kinship with other ecosystem builders. We invest a lot of hard work, whether it be helping companies start or connecting them to opportunities or relationships.
We're not doing this because we think we're going to make a lot of money. We're doing it because we think we should give opportunity to people regardless of where they come from.
There's a huge emotional impact on the startups that we are fortunate enough to serve, and that really revolves around them oftentimes being seen for the very first time.
We don't view ourselves as investors who just invest in entrepreneurs. We view ourselves as evangelists, supporters, cheerleaders.
Every startup that comes through our door will ask them, where's your market? Where do you want to go? What we really want to hear is, we want to impact the world.
Startup ecosystem builders raise a platform for us as a company to be entrepreneurial,
solve problems,
drive growth,
literally change the world.
The success of our business is really a testament to the support that we've been provided. And I think when you look at the collective effort of all of our parts, like, who knows what we can make this.
Right now, we're in the midst of one of the greatest shortages of healthcare workers, with a booming population of folks who increasingly need their expertise. At Care Academy, we provide online professional development for caregivers of older adults. I attended a 2-week program for female founders through Google for Startups, and they invited me back for their pitch competition. Online classes for caregivers. I always call Google Demo Day the most impactful 6 minutes we've experienced as a company. It gave us exposure at a moment that we really needed it, and we ended up oversubscribing on our first fundraising round. Care Academy is now available in all 50 states. We started out with maybe a couple dozen caregivers to now over 50,000. We'd love to see how we move into 500,000 caregivers, 5 million caregivers, and really grow the industry here in the US and abroad. We believe we can build that kind of healthcare future where we're empowering even more people outside of the 4 walls of the hospital to really help older adults who need care.
My name is Carson, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of FanFood, an app that's supporting events to order concessions for express pickup. Joining the military enabled me to be a leader. Things that I've learned in the military, like how to plan in uncertain environments, how to adapt, is kind of entrepreneurship 101. Coming from the Midwest as a first-time founder, fundraising, finding and hiring tech talent, these are all things I didn't know how to do. And that's where Bunker Labs came in. Bunker Labs and Google for Startups support military veteran founders. They help out through accelerators or incubators or mentorships. If you are super passionate about building something, doesn't matter if you're from Iowa or from Silicon Valley, you signed on the dotted line, you deserve that opportunity as well.
It's no secret that the democratic system is in crisis. When it comes to legislation and policy, it's hard to know what's actually going on behind closed doors. We don't have access to the information that actually impacts us on a daily basis.
So for communities and for advocacy organizations, it's that much harder for them to gain access to these policies.
Civic Eagle is a technology company on a mission to democratize information around legislation policies here in the United States.
Were we typical founders?
Hell no. There was nobody that looked like us. 2 Nigerian immigrants starting the company in Minnesota.
With Google for Startups emerging for Black founders, we reimagined the product we're building into a B2B model.
And we get our first investor check. We're working with organizations that are helping solve the problems of immigration, and they're using our software to do that.
At Civic Eagle, we're not only building a successful business,
we're also creating incredible social impact.
My vision for Hong Kong is to be a global hub for entrepreneurs. Hardware manufacturing is a black box, and there are only a handful of women in hardware. Can we change that?
I'm the co-founder of 3DNA, and we're building vertical technology for eye care providers to offer bespoke, tailor-made glasses.
The 982 Express program offers women in hardware the best network of resources, from capital to distributors and manufacturers.
One big challenge of hardware is how much capital it requires and how much time it requires. We're really just looking at new ideas, new sources of information that could move us along.
Believe in yourself, back yourself, trust your judgment.
It's the first time I'm surrounded by female founders as well as hardware founders. And I think those 2 factors together made the program like a very valuable experience.
Our highest goal would be to be the landing spot for women around the world who want to build hardware.
The majority of gyms and fitness studios are small businesses. That's really where the heart of the industry lies. Since they don't have a ton of marketing budget, it was hard for them to get in front of new users. That's where ClassPass comes in. ClassPass connects people to fitness studios all around the globe, all through our app. We use Google Analytics 360 for everything in marketing. As a startup, every marketing dollar counts, and measurement is critical. If we're running an out-of-home ferry ad or a local news piece, we'll use Google Analytics 360 to track the impact in terms of traffic and conversions. It's how we understand exactly how our customers move through our website and book classes. Knowing the numbers down to a science and knowing the impact that small tests will have can be astronomical. If we're able to increase our site conversion rate by even 0.1%, that means thousands of new users that we're able to send to studio partners. We're giving studio owners time back to do what they're passionate about.
I grew up in a place where I didn't know there were more options than what existed. I'm 4th generation Mexican-American, farm labor. My parents, they spent most of their lives in the fields, and then of course my grandparents spent their entire lives in the fields. How does the son or daughter of a migrant farm worker really become a computer programmer? In underdog cities across the United States, you have to have a place where you can point to and say, this is where you come. That's why we started Bitwise. We teach people to code, we buy blighted properties in our downtown, rehab them, and lease them back out to the technology industry, and then we build software and software companies. Our business is 100% powered by Google products. We use analytics to understand how people are interacting with us, and we've seen traffic increase by 20%. We've added 2,000 tech jobs. That's families with groceries on the table, gas in the tank, but it's also hopefulness. What Bitwise can do best is set that new expectation that you can make this happen for you and your family for generations to come.
Every year in the United States, businesses waste 72 billion pounds of perfectly good food. And at the same time, we have 41 million people in this country that are gonna go to bed hungry tonight. That is a huge value of food that is just going to waste. That was the impetus behind Gooder. Gooder is an app. We inventory the food a business sells. When they are closing, they request a pickup. One of our do-gooders, using Google Maps API, gets it delivered to a nonprofit, preventing the food from going to waste. Google Maps helps reduce our carbon footprint by having our drivers take the most efficient routes.
What Gooder has done for ATL has been absolutely phenomenal. A community that eats better is a stronger community.
Gooder is approaching over 2 million pounds of edible surplus food that we've diverted from landfills. And this has accounted for almost 1.7 million meals to people in need. Gooder has built technology to solve a real-world problem. Businesses can do well by doing good or doing gooder.
Parents talk constantly about their kids' schools. Parents love to gossip. I should know, I'm a parent and was a middle school math teacher, but parents had one set of information, schools had another set of information, and they weren't talking to each other. I decided to change that. POSIP prompts parents for weekly feedback and turns that parent engagement into data that schools use to track trends, solve problems, and bring joy to teachers and parents. Being a founder of color here in Nashville, I didn't see myself as a typical Silicon Valley founder. I am based out of a Google for Startups tech hub. That's how I found out about their Black Founders Immersion program, which led me to Founder Gym. It gave me a community of other founders who, like me, had an idea that they were looking to bring into the world. We went from 7 school partners to 75 school partners and 33,000 parents in our platform. The impact is changing the mindsets and the culture of schools. When we can get parents and teachers talking to each other, we get a little closer to making a better future for our kids.
Back in 2012, our salon had been open for a decade and a half.
Stylists and barbers were no longer wanting to sign long-term contracts. They wanted to be their own bosses.
What that looked like to us was empty chairs. Salon owners around the country, around the world actually, have that same issue. We're not able to keep our small business open. That's how ShearShare was born. The first mobile app that connects salon and barbershop owners to individual stylists to fill their empty salon space by the day. We knew that we weren't the typical startup founder.
Going into investors' offices, I'm not a white man.
We don't live in the Valley.
We are definitely proud Texans, Lone Star all the way. Google for Startups took us to the next level.
To get you to the right people at the right time. Because of Google Demo Day, we received $500,000 in capital. Somebody sees what we're trying to do.
Validation.
And it's the validation that comes with that.
Now, we're in over 460 cities and 11 countries.
We were just trying to fill an empty chair in our own salon.
To think of a problem you're solving for yourself and then you're helping other small business owners, it doesn't get any better than that.
The world needs startups because humans are evolving. Our world is evolving.
We want to help startups succeed in their business goals. They just have to focus on delivering their best work possible, and we take care of everything else.
We share a kinship with other ecosystem builders. We in a lot of hard work, whether it be helping companies start or connecting them to opportunities or relationships.
We're not doing this because we think we're going to make a lot of money. We're doing it because we think we should give opportunity to people regardless of where they come from.
There's a huge emotional impact on the startups that we are fortunate enough to serve, and that really revolves around them oftentimes being seen for the very first time.
We don't view ourselves as investors who just invest in entrepreneurs. We view ourselves as evangelists, supporters, cheerleaders.
Every startup that comes through our door will ask them, where's your market? Where do you want to go? And what we really want to hear is, we want to impact the world.
Catch my soul, lose my mind, you're the only trip I need. I'm losing control, your eyes entice me. Just letting go, your hold is tightening. I feel you rushing through my veins. I
Everyone, please take your seats. Our show is about to begin. Everyone, please take your seats. Our show is about to begin. Please welcome to the stage the Startup Grind MC, Finn Mpofu.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you had a fantastic lunchtime and made lots of friends, as our one of our Startup Grind values is, right? That's what we're all about, and you'll hear me say that over and over again because I am extremely passionate about our values. Quick announcement. As some of you may or may not know, we of course have over 600 chapters in 125 countries. And one of the things we encourage our chapter directors to do all around the world is to come up with initiatives that they are extremely passionate about, especially when they can kind of align with what Startup Grind is all about. So about a few months ago, we had about four of our chapter directors from the US, Lakeisha, Louise, Patrice, and David, reach out to the community team and say, hey, look, we are really passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we know you have the upcoming global conference, and Startup Grind has been described as one of the most diverse conferences out there in the startup space, and would love to do something. We thought, hey, why don't you put together a little program, pitch it to us, and we can look to add it to the program. And I'm delighted to say that they will actually be hosting a town hall this afternoon in the Silicon Valley FinTech Bay. It's the Workshop Bay. It's in your app. Look at the time. It's about 3 p.m. Feel free to hang along to that if you're interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and go along and support them. Okay, excellent. So, it's been an interesting past 12 months in the startup space, right? And our next guest speaker will definitely be sharing some interesting insights as to why some seemingly promising companies go off the rails. David Sachs, ladies and gentlemen, is the co-founder and general partner of Craft Ventures. They have over $850 million in assets under management. Let's give him a massive Startup Grind welcome to David Sachs.
Thank you. All right. How's everyone doing today? Good? Whenever I meet with founders, and ask how they're doing, the answer is always, great, we're killing it, crushing it. And then, every investor update I ever get, hundreds of them, so, it's always the same. We're doing great. And then a few months later, I run into the founder. It's like, how you doing? How's the company? It's like, oh, it's over. It's like, wait, what? You were killing it. What happened? It's like, no, we ran out of money and died. It's like, wow, what? That's crazy. You guys were just crushing it just a few months ago. And it seems like, this is a common problem with startups, that they seem like it's working and then somehow they go off the rails. And it can really happen at any stage. In the past year, we've seen a bunch of companies that were weeks away from IPOing. They were supposed to be big IPOs, and then like they just implode on the verge of IPO. And so what I thought I'd do today, I know there's like a lot of other sessions probably advising you guys on how to find product market fit, which is definitely the #1 thing that startups have to do. But what I thought I'd spend my time doing is walking through reasons, I think there's about 10 of them I've kind of cataloged here, that pitfalls that startups often fall into, so that you guys can maybe avoid some of these problems. And so this presentation is called How Not to Go Off the Rails. I'm just going to kind of walk through some of these things. So #1 is the problem of negative gross margins, negative unit economics. We've seen this a lot lately with so-called tech-enabled businesses, businesses that operate in the physical world. And a business that has negative unit economics is basically selling a product for less than what it costs. So they're losing money, not just at kind of the corporate level, because basically every startup is unprofitable, but they're actually losing money on every transaction, which means that no matter how big they get, they're still going to be unprofitable. It's the problem of selling dollar bills for 90 cents. And nothing will make you look like you've got a great business than selling dollar bills for 90 cents. It'll be a thriving business, but then as soon as you raise the price to the correct level, you won't have any business. And so it's very important for startups, I think, that are, especially the ones that are operating in the physical world, to always be understanding, not just their burn, but also what kinds of money are they losing. Again, sort of losing money at the corporate level, corporate overhead is okay, all startups do, but make sure that your unit economics are positive. And what we've seen is that trying to re-engineer the unit economics of a business that's already at scale is a brutally hard thing to do. Trying to find the scalable model when you're already operating at scale is sort of a contradiction in terms. And startups, I think, would be well advised to make sure that their unit economics work before they go into kind of hyperscaling mode. Problem #2, I'd say that one of the top reasons why startups kind of stall out is because they find it hard to acquire customers. Distribution is usually the most difficult problem for a startup to solve. And so what happens is they start overpaying on CAC to kind of hide the fact that they can't grow. And the reason why they can't grow is the low-hanging fruit has sort of dried up. Maybe they went to a startup accelerator or incubator and they got all their classmates to sign up and it looked like there's a lot of growth, but then they graduated and suddenly it gets much harder. Maybe your initial mode of customer acquisition is email marketing and you run out of email lists, or you've got a viral feature, but the virality sort of dries up. And so this sort of problem of the initial saturation of of kind of an initial distribution channel causing your CAC to become prohibitive is a very common problem. And what I would say about this is the best way to deal with this is from a very early stage, make sure you're attributing your leads correctly. You understand your lead attribution, what channels your leads are coming from, and make sure not to confuse them. So for example, like one of the problems that we see a lot is that the inbound leads are the Glengarry leads. They close at a very high rate. The outbound leads are typically very low quality. And if you're kind of blending these things together, you might have an exaggerated sense of how good the outbound leads are, and you might sort of overscale that team. We've seen that happen before. Problem #3, the leaky bucket or churn. I think everyone knows about churn, but it has to be talked about. Churn can be a real problem for startups because it's a time bomb. Your sales can be going great, but if a deal doesn't come up for renewal until a year later, you just won't know about this time bomb. And salespeople aren't necessarily incentivized to avoid sales that are likely to churn because they just want to close everything they can. And so this problem can manifest itself downstream in customer support a long time down the road. The rules of thumb I like to have around this is to look at retention on a logo basis. Enterprise customers are sort of the highest retaining. They should retain about 95% of the time, 85% for your SMB customers. And startups churn the most. Doesn't mean you shouldn't sell to them, but they're going to have about a 75% logo retention. But what we like to see in all of these cases is that on a dollar basis, you have dollar retention over 100%, meaning that your expansion from the customers who retain outweighs the churned customers. And if you can't do that, you might want to slow down your growth so that you can fix your product. Cause #4, I think of a lot of rail jumping is an external dependency that turns into an existential risk. You see this a lot, obviously, when the rug gets pulled out from from under startups that are operating on somebody else's platform, or it could be a biz dev dependency. I tend to like operating on platforms better than operating on sort of contracts. Ironically, like having just operating based on an API relationship, I think can be a lot better than operating based on a sort of contractual relationship. But what I would tell you is that you've got to try and avoid these biz dev dependencies. I think trying to convince a big company to do something is just as a killer. And depending on other startups to do things for you is very risky because startups change their mind a lot and they're kind of flaky. So I would say avoid biz dev dependencies. Platforms are good. Race onto platforms to sort of bootstrap your company, but then at some point you've got to race off them to diversify this risk so the rug can't get pulled out from under you. Number 5, regulatory. We've seen a number of high-profile startups kind of go off the rails because in part of some sort of regulatory problem. And what I'd say here is that regulatory issues tend to fall into kind of there's black, white, and gray areas. And a lot of startups are in gray areas because they're innovating, they're disrupting, and their innovation wasn't taken into account at the time the laws were written, and so frequently it's gray. And what I would tell you is that if what you're doing is in a gray area, I think that's fine, I think you should do it, but you need to advocate very early on for why what you're doing is in the public interest. Don't try to hide it. Try to explain to people that your interpretation of the law is the correct one. By the same token, if what you're doing is a black letter violation of the law, don't do it. I think startups think they can get away with it because in the first year or so, no one's really paying attention. But as they get bigger, people will definitely pay attention. This is kind of like the Napster problem. So if it's a black letter violation, don't do it. Great, do it, but advocate. Area number 6, sales compliance. The sales department seems to be the locus of a lot of problems for companies that have kind of gone off the rails. And I think part of this is, in large part, is because sales is compensated differently than the rest of the company. So the rest of the company is compensated with equity. They're kind of playing the infinite game, whereas sales is typically on quarterly incentive plans. They have to make quota. They're under incredible pressure to either make quota or get fired, and that can lead to some bad behaviors unless they're not like tightly controlled. So like one of them that we kind of mentioned is the churn problem. Salespeople are incentivized to hit a number, but how they hit that number is less tightly regulated. You have to make sure that they're not over-promising things to customers because otherwise that customer will just become a churn problem down the road. Similarly, if you're a highly regulated company and you have to engage in sort of highly regulated activities, you should have a team outside of the sales department that's sort of monitoring the compliance because sales doesn't really have a great incentive to do compliance on itself. Number 7, Mechanical Turk. So in a way, this is a version of the gross margin problem. I think this is where the company is doing things by hand instead of with software. And I think some of the worst advice that's being passed around Silicon Valley these days is that startups should do things that don't scale. I don't quite understand why people say this. I think the whole point of a technology company is to figure out the most elegant, scalable model you can. But this advice, I think, becomes really toxic when a fast-growing startup tries to essentially cover up gaps in its product by throwing bodies at the problem. And essentially, you're faking product capabilities by using humans. And these bodies are basically cogs, and they will cause a gross margin problem. It will also cause a cultural problem because the company becomes dependent on sort of on throwing bodies at the problem instead of like innovating the product. And so I would say it's okay to do this to some degree, but try not to let it become too much of a problem. Number 8, founder psychology. I think this is a really big one. In a way, founder psychology is at the root of, it seems like all these companies, all the high-profile companies have gone off the rails. The founders are all kind of described the same way. It's like, crazy and aggressive, visionary. And when everything's going kind of up and to the right, it's like good crazy. But then when things implode, it's like bad crazy. And so kind of what kind of explains this weird dichotomy where crazy is sometimes good and sometimes bad? And I think the answer is that the truth is that founders have to be much more aggressive, much crazier, if you will, more visionary than certainly the average person. And those qualities are necessary and get rewarded by the world up to a certain point. And I think we're used to thinking of the world as operating on a normal distribution. It doesn't. I think these qualities get rewarded to a great degree, but then suddenly you go too far, and the founder pushes things too far, and they go off the rails. And so the curve doesn't look like a bell curve. It actually looks like some sort of shark jumping type curve. And what I would say is that founders need to have some of these qualities, these visionary, kind of aggressive, crazy qualities, but you've got to learn to balance your psychology. And it's good to have people around you who can help make sure that you're not kind of losing perspective and you're not kind of on your way to going off the rails. There's a kind of company culture version of this problem, and I think the simplest way to understand company culture is as a macrocosm of the founder's psychology. Whatever is happening in the founder's head will be writ large across the company. If the founder is hyper-competitive, the company culture becomes very competitive. If the founder is very corporate, the culture becomes kind of stuffy. If the founder is kind of warlike, the company culture will be very aggressive. And if the founder is kind of cuts corners, the company culture can become reckless. And what I would say is that the founder's behavior gets role modeled. If crazy founder equals crazy culture. And so what you want to do is not just balance your own psychology, you want to balance your founding team. And so that the sort of the hive mind of the company is sort of has psychological balance to it. And I'd also just add that values must mature over time. The things that will work for you in the early stages may not work for you later. Facebook changed its motto from move fast and break things to move fast and build scalable infrastructure, because you just can't get away with some of the things you can get away with when you're a bigger company. Macro shock, number 10. So this, in a way, is a trigger for a lot of the reappraisals that go on. Because normally when a company has these problems, it's because they're not internally recognized, and the reappraisal happens usually because of some sort of external event. So we've seen lately as company goes out for IPO, everyone at the company thought it was doing great. They were drinking the Kool-Aid, and then all of a sudden, the public markets sort of pop the bubble. Or it can be, it could be any fundraising round. Company goes out to try and raise money, and all of a sudden, investors kind of pop this bubble. And we saw this around the dot-com crash. It can happen to any sector that's sort of hot for a while and then falls out of favor. You take something like crypto, where it felt like all the rules got suspended because it was a hot space in terms of rules about how much revenue you should have or users you should have. And what happens is when the space is no longer hot, the rules reapply, and all of a sudden you've got to show revenue, you've got to show real users, and so the bubble gets popped. Now, this is sort of a parade of horribles, and I want to kind of couch this, and this is kind of number 11, commoditization. This is the Red Queen effect, where sometimes it feels as a startup that we're moving really fast, but we're staying in the same place because of competition. There's always lots of startups that are seemingly chasing us and kind of on our tail. Commoditization isn't something we cause, it's something that can happen to us if we don't move fast enough. And I think this is one of the big dilemmas about this sort of presentation is, yes, there's this parade of horribles that can happen, but if you don't move fast enough, then your idea will get commoditized, competitors will win the market. And so really what I'm urging in this presentation is not taking no risk. You have to take risks, you have to move fast, but it's to have a sort of more balanced view of the debt that you're accumulating, sort of the cultural debt, the operational debt, the gross margin debt, and so on, so that you can pay down this debt over time instead of having it become a problem that's so acute that your startup goes off the rails. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, David. That was brilliant. Oh, just had it. There you go. You didn't even get 10. You got a bonus. You got 11. How about that? One company that is definitely not going on the rails is Monday.com. I live in the UK, and I see their ads everywhere. Whoever's running their marketing is doing a fantastic job. Everyone here familiar with Monday.com? Anyone use Monday.com? Yeah, it's brilliant. Discussing a new era of software changing the way we work is the co-founder and CEO of Monday.com, Roy Mann, the project management platform. He'll be joined by Nino Markovic, who's the CEO and managing director of Sapphire Ventures, who have over $4 billion in assets under management. Let's give them some Startup Grind love when we welcome to the stage Roy and Nino.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Nino. I run an enterprise-focused venture fund called Sapphire Ventures that focuses on exceptional entrepreneurs trying to disrupt the enterprise IT space, like Roy and his co-founder Eran over here. I'm sorry, I missed a show of hands of who actually here has heard of Monday.com. Would you guys mind repeating that? All right, so quite a number. Good. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here with Roy, CEO of Monday.com. We've had the great fortune of leading a $150 million financing for the company recently. Company's based in Israel. And so Roy, tell us just a little headline thing or two about Monday to get the audience warmed up.
Okay, so first of all, it's not a project management tool like they introduced us with. We're very good at project management, but so it's work operating system. That's like what we're. I don't know if you got to see the billboards. We took some of them in the one.
It's hard not to. It's hard not to.
What? It's hard not to? Okay, so that's a good job we've done. So we started. So Monday is essentially a platform that people can, any team can manage pretty much everything they want to with us. We have like a lot of R&D teams, marketing teams, sales team running on us, HR. And we have people building airplanes, running manufacturing plants, doing clinical trial research, and then hotels, restaurants, like really everyone, because you can build your own process on Monday and manage the team the way you like to and at scale. And that's like...
That's great. And give maybe the audience a little bit of sense of scale and size of the organization. One of the things I find amazing about Monday, and I've been on the board of many companies, I get a daily SMS with how the company has done in the last day. Not mind you, week or month or year, but every day I get an SMS. So a little bit of a radical transparency at work there, but give us a little sense of the scale of the organization.
So we started at 2014. That's where we launched the first product, and since then we grew relatively fast. Last year, like at 2018, like the beginning, we started with 50 million ARR. 2019, we finished with 120. So we jumped from like 50 to 120 million ARR, and before that we were at 18. So 18 to 50 to 120. We now have over 100,000 paying companies in over 160 countries.
Wow.
And with over 200 different business verticals. It's probably everyone, because the category is so big, like of work and of, managing teams and processes. Basically, everyone is doing it. So our target audience is everyone, information workers. It's 1.3 billion information workers. Yeah.
And so talk more about this WorkOS definition of the category. I found it interesting in terms of choosing sort of to redefine or define a category at this large size. Companies typically do it sometimes earlier in their life, but you've kind of waited for the right moment. And tell us a little bit, what about the company right now makes it the right time for you to come out and define
so we
a
need
category?
to talk about the history. So like for all our life, when we went to raise money, people like, it's really hard to raise money, especially in the beginning. And in the beginning, they looked at us and said, project management. Every investor kind of got burnt from investing in some productivity tools, so like they didn't want to invest, and they couldn't make out who we were. Okay, it's like project management, but not project management, and it was really difficult. And throughout time, we really struggled in explaining in one sentence what the company does, because essentially it's a platform that people built their own management tool. And obviously it has a lot of, you can manage process, orders, projects, events, HR, and there wasn't a name for it. So we waited for years to someone to define it, and we're not alone in this category. And now there came a time that it made sense, so we kind of picked up the glove and named it WorkOS, and we have other players in it as well, like you mentioned, which is like unique that we didn't say we are the only one.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so
Yeah, typically.
we have Airtable, Coda, Notion. We feel have the same idea of giving people the tools to solve their own problems, rather than we're very different companies, each one of us in terms of like go-to-market, but the idea of changing software, which is kind of like what this says, it's happening with the movement of like giving users the power to define and craft their own destiny in the tools they use, rather than you have to fit yourself to the software and use a rigid software, and when it's not good enough, you need to switch.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's one of the things that appealed to me tremendously about Monday is this idea that for the repeatable processes that are standardized across companies, you have big companies, you have Salesforce, you have SAP, you have Oracle, Workday, and many others, but still most of the work happens outside of those standard processes. It's email, it's Slack, it's whole conversations and Excel spreadsheets still. And so having a system that allows you to enshrine some of those custom processes as well is super interesting. But talk to me more about this platform company concept. I think this is a new thing for Monday, new initiative. Obviously, the holy grail for every software company is to become a platform company and have other companies built on top of it. Why now, and why do you think Monday is ready to be a platform company?
So I think we're part of a bigger movement of really empowering users. You see that with designers, for example, there's a lot of tools that enable them to be more powerful, like developers, let's say, and that they can do mock-ups and take things more forward. And we see that we always had that mindset of giving people power, and how do we kind of like democratize software and allow people to do it. So essentially, we've always been that sort of platform. And today we're opening it up for developers to build on us and really like, if we can do it, they can do it in terms of building blocks. Like we will develop the same building blocks as the community. And you know, it's another step in the evolution of opening up the platform and being really like allowing people to do whatever they want.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, in terms of transparency, you know, very few people probably came up here and shared their revenue run rates. Tends to be more of a secret hush thing here in the Valley. Can you talk a little bit more about the transparency? I found you guys to be some of the most transparent company. It feels like all your employees know everything that's going on in the company, all the metrics. Maybe share a little bit more of that philosophy.
We have like in the office we have hundreds of dashboards showing every metric we have on everything, like from how much money we have in the bank to ARR, new signups, everything, and like also people who come to interview in the office like see those stuff. It's like, so we started off being transparent. When we were like small, 5 people, and we never found a reason not to. So that's how we came to, and it only gave us really positive things. For example, everyone knows everything, so if there is a problem, we all come and fix it. It's not up to some person to say, hey, there's a problem, convince other people to do other stuff, like really making a point. Like it's enough that one person sees it and then like everyone comes in the morning. So like for us, it was always about ownership, passing ownership to people, making them feel it's theirs. And it has to do with everything. It's not just the numbers, it's also the cleanliness of the office.
Sure.
Okay, it's like the, you know, if they, I don't know, break things. We get like a really expensive laptop, so if you break it, you can take another one, it's fine. Like you can take 20. Just know how much money it costs. It's your company, you can do whatever you want. So that's like passing the ownership to the people that they feel it's theirs. And it also means that we need to allow them to do whatever they feel is right with guidance. But everyone is like really driven to do impact in what they believe in. Like, so that's ownership that we don't get to decide. I don't get to tell people what to do.
Of course. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, in the Valley here, OKRs have become a big thing over the last 5-10 years, and managing by objectives, but also key results sounds like is something you've done always. Are there any pitfalls for folks here to consider if they think about going the radical transparency and sort of management by metric way?
So I think managing by metrics is like the crudest form of transparency. It's like telling people where to go and not how to get there, and it's really good. You give them autonomy, you give them a way to do what they believe in. It's a longer term. You need to think about it in I can give an example. I've done like a gazillion A/B tests in my life, and after a while, you figure out like some stuff that makes sense. Write the text in a clear way, make a very pronounceable call for action, and then you see someone doing not that. So you're like, this is not going to work. But how will they learn? I never learned from someone telling me what's right and what's wrong. I tested it. So how are we as a company willing to give people the ability to make more mistakes? And we pay for it. Now, like you put a landing page out with that problem, it costs like tens of thousands of dollars. So but they're only going to learn if they're going to try the stuff they want to learn. And miraculously, everyone is making the same mistakes in the beginning. So there is a tension about that, but I would always prefer to teach someone by letting them try it out and see what works and what's not, as long as it's contained. So you need the frameworks for it, you need the operation for it, I can tell them, I think it's not going to work because this and that, but then at the end they're going to do whatever they want, and a lot of them do whatever they want.
Of course.
And the cool thing about that is that sometimes I'm wrong. And that's really great, because like now I'm wrong more and more I'm wrong, because we're inventing a lot of cool stuff, but that's what you gain from it. That's like, it's freedom, because I don't need to
it's
fall
fascinating.
that.
This philosophy is so embedded in the company. I actually, in my 22 years of doing this, I've never seen another company actually build software to track all these analytics and A/B tests. Do you mind sharing a little bit about
So
Big Brain?
we have a tool called Big Brain. So it's like our, let's say, source of records tool. It's a BI tool. It's also an operations tool. So so that's different from classic BI tools. Like it just doesn't only show you the information. You can act on the information you see there. So for example, if you want an A/B test, you open it up and in Big Brain, and it gives you all the measures you need to make a decision, and it's a unified view that is really good. It's like very clear. You see if it's like here or here, and people can make the same choices over and over, and then we improve the tool, everyone improves. Okay, so we took from day one a huge effort to invest in building such a tool, because of that, to allow people, and that's a big part of transparency, it's a big part of ownership. You need supporting operations for it.
Of course.
Yeah, so without that, you can't give freedom, because it doesn't like, we always give the comparison if you have like a very skyscraper, and you're on the rooftop with the bicycle, okay? So it's not like the best way to like let someone off with a bicycle on the rooftop, right? Like they can fall. But what if you put like a 2 meters guard, okay, like around it? Then you feel safe. It's not a problem. So that's what we're trying to do with Big Brain, kind of like iron out all the insights into something people can understand. That takes a lot of effort.
Makes sense. Make it sound so easy.
And we invested in it from like when we were 5 people. We did that because it meant a lot to us, because we didn't want a lot of analytics tools, like you look at them and then you have excuses. Oh, that information didn't pass. Oh, that is a problem because it takes like 4 hours for the data to aggregate. So we didn't want any, like we wanted our own database, our own data that we can go in and really figure it out so we can learn. So maybe like failing in 2 other startups helped in that point.
Makes sense. So Roy, it seems so easy, right? So you just measure everything and then you go 1850, 120. Is that how it always was?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the early struggles.
Yeah, so like when you look at the graph and it's growing, like every month is a struggle, like really every month. Because like to double or more than double, it means that if we want to double this year, we need to do in 1 year what we've done throughout the life of the company. That's what it means. So it cannot be the same things that we've done until now that will make us succeed this year. So you need to break everything. And you have like, there is a nice visual thing of how you build a car, and people think it's like right? You see the wheels, and then they put the top, and then, you know, you end up having a car, and say, no, you start with a skateboard, a scooter, a bicycle, and a car. But the thing is that when you move to the scooter, you need to break the skateboard.
Yeah.
And that's how to do what most people find comfortable is like decorate the skateboard, put an engine on it, and like keep the skate. And you need to break things. So that's really hard. But it's the first stage that is the most hard is like reaching product market fit. Like that struggle of like figuring out what is the product that people actually want to buy, opposed to a product that solves the problem. So we started with a product that solves the problem, but it just like was really hard to adopt.
Yeah.
So we got thrown out of a lot of companies for like you come and pitch them, and they tell you like, okay, sounds really interesting, and then nothing happens because they don't want it. So that phase of product market fit is probably the hardest. So it does get easier in many ways over time.
Is there one thing, as you think back on the early days and that seeking that product market fit, is there one thing that you feel like you did wrong, or you wish you would have gotten to quicker, or is it sort of...
I did like a million things wrong.
Grind.
but like in hindsight, what I would... The most painful stuff was, I think, in hiring the right people. And like there is like I interviewed like hundreds of people, and then I met someone who taught me how to hire PMs, product managers, and then I understood that I didn't know how to interview people before. And I can mention it now. It's not that simple because I needed a lot of training, and I failed all the time, and he wasn't happy with me, but I learned eventually. But it goes like this: you have a list of qualities you want, and then you need to, in one interview, find a really good signal on each one of those traits. Yeah. So, for example, communication. Are you a good communicator? So, for project manager, for product manager, they need to communicate well.
Of course.
So, and then at the end of an interview, you can say, okay, is he good or not at communicating, and how strong is my signal? And then, like, you build an interview to get all the signals in an hour, and then, you know, you teach it to everyone, and when a few people do the same interview, you get, like, such a strong signal that it's for...
So people issues and hiring, and I guess that's not different from today, as you think about the challenges that 120+ million revenue run rate company growing fast, still the biggest problem?
Yeah, obviously, but like the pains of hiring the wrong person is hard, and then you need to sometimes part ways. Yeah. And the thing that wasn't intuitive for me is that if something is not working well with someone, usually when you part ways with them, it's like you understand it's the best thing for both sides. Because a lot of like early stage managers try to like you know, improve people a lot, and like sometimes the other side doesn't want it. It's not a good fit. Yeah. So that's like a good tip to try and figure that out. And also with investors, by the way, if we did something wrong, is like raising money. I think now we're relatively good at it.
Yeah, I would say so.
But in terms of process and everything, but like we weren't good in the beginning. We got like we're from Israel, and I'm not really proud to say, but we got no from every investor in Israel, and there are a lot of them there. So well, except the ones who said yes, but that's like two. But like we really weren't that good at that because we didn't understand how to explain what we know very well in the beginning. Because you understand it really well, and you need to take someone who meets like a few startups a day to where you are, And how investors think is now, and since we learned that well, is how we think about the business. Is like, what are the risks? Where do we want to go? Like, we want to reach, let's say, next year we want to double again, which we want to double again. So what are the risks of getting there? Working it backward, explaining that, and seeing that from that perspective, you understand that the product, when in the beginning we talked a lot about the product, is not the only thing they want to talk about. They want to see the risks, and then you debug it. Like, that's how we got good at it. Like, we were always two in every meeting, and the one who didn't talk listened, and then after the meeting we sat down and identified all the risk factors that the investors saw and were not addressed, and then improved. And that's like proved to be really good.
Great. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but Roy, thank you very much for your time. I had 20 more questions, but I'll let the audience chase you afterwards and ask away. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nino and Roy. That was absolutely brilliant. All right, so I guess 20 years ago, 10 years ago even, if you'd asked me personally what AI stood for, I'd have been like, the answer? Allen Iverson. Clearly not, right? I think times have changed and artificial intelligence has become a mainstream in all of our lives. And if you have a mobile device in your pocket today or in your handbag, then you definitely are using some form of artificial intelligence. Sharing her experience of working in AI and the evolution of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we have Irina Kaufman, who is the director and business lead at Facebook AI, Facebook's dedicated business unit on artificial intelligence with research areas in the likes of conversational AI, NLP, human and machine learning. Let's give Irina a massive Startup Grind welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey. So thank you for having me today, and thank you for the really warm welcome. So as mentioned, I work at Facebook. I'm a director there, and in particular, I work in the Facebook AI lab, which is really exciting. But before I dive into what do we do at Facebook that involves AI, I wanted to share a little background about me and how I got so lucky. I consider it lucky. I'm not, oh, perfect, thank you. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a researcher, and still I get to work in AI, which is pretty cool, and I got to be involved in some really cool projects that I'll share with you. So I immigrated from the Ukraine as a refugee at 5 years old, and that's really important to me and is part of who I am. It's also part of how I approach the projects I work on and making sure things I work on have a global impact and think about users around the world. And although I came from the Ukraine early on, I was exposed to engineering actually back there, and when I came by my father, who was an electrical engineer and a professor. Having been exposed so early, I swore I would not be in tech. I wanted to be a lawyer, a doctor, anything but in tech. And here we go, I'm at Facebook, and before that, I actually spent a lot of time at Google, actually almost 12 years there. So who remembers Radio Shack? Do you guys remember Radio Shack? So I spent a lot of my childhood at Radio Shack. Given we had just immigrated here, my parents didn't have a ton of money to buy me all these toys and gadgets, but my dad thought it would be great to spend every weekend, trip to Radio Shack to buy parts to build little circuit boards with LED lights and wires and test the current and switches and expose his daughter to engineering just like him. What we learned, though, is that I enjoyed way more planning the trip. What was the budget? How many parts are we going to buy? And then on the trip, managing with the store and the customer service agents what I wanted, if they could order extra parts for me. I was 5 years old at this time. And then when we'd get home with the products, I would tell each family member what their role was to build. And then I would track their building and give them timelines. So I'm a program manager. It was a given that that's where I would be. But how did that get me to AI? And it's really cool that the last speaker talked about product management, program management, so you got a little bit of glimpse of the value, hopefully, of those parts of the team. So before I jump into AI and how I got there, I want to show you through the eyes of a little kid. This is my son, Logan. He's about 5 in this picture. And we used to take him to Bring Your Kids to Work Day at Google, and my husband worked there at the time as well. And on these trips, we'd want to make sure that he didn't think mommy and daddy were going to work to jump in bounce houses, eat cookies, and build Legos, which is mostly what happens at Bring Your Kids to Work Day. So on the way there, I asked my kid, what does daddy do for a living? Just to prepare him in case he met one of our managers. And he said, daddy builds Google Games. It's spot on. My husband worked on Doodles at that time. Then I turned to, what does mommy do? And remember, this is when we're setting up the Google AI team. The first year, we don't really know what's going to happen. All I knew about my job is that it was get shit done. That was basically it. I was the chief of staff for the organization. My kid paused, pondered for a minute, and came back with, mommy must be daddy's boss. That was it. And while that might be true at home, that was definitely not the case at work. But the evolution of AI at that point, not many people necessarily believed in it. It had been around for a long time, but it was kind of this current wave that we're still in. And from there, the next year when we took him, I asked him again, what does mommy do? It had developed into robots. She must be working with robots. So it's getting somewhat closer. And then I think a few months later, it didn't have to even wait a year, I hear him on his headphones playing video games and yelling at the AI, completely screaming and telling me the AI gets to train. The AI gets to train on video games way longer than we let him play, so obviously it's going to be better than him. So as the world got accustomed to AI, so did my kid. So what was my actual role? At this point, I've kind of figured out what do I do. And a lot of it centered around people, operations, and figuring out how to establish a space for our engineers to be able to innovate and support open research. It sounds a little crazy, but even at a big company, we were kind of operating like a startup. I was moving from the search organization, which was so established, to starting a small team. I think we started around 8 people to set up a Google AI team at that point. I also worked on establishing the AI residency program to bring people in and enable those not newer to ML to get involved, start being mentored by researchers. I also wanted to see if I could manage a technical project, like I used to on those shopping trips to Radio Shack. And one of the first projects I managed as a TPM, a technical program manager, was the release of TensorFlow, a machine learning framework. And I continue to do that in my current role. I also helped establish the ML fairness team at the company, thinking through, as we release all this great AI technology, are we doing it in a responsible way, including publishing the principles in responsible machine learning development. And then, last but not least, in all of this, I wanted to make a positive social impact. I remember the day I decided to move from search to AI. And we sat at a dining room table with my parents who thought I was crazy. And if you were here earlier this morning, I heard one of the speakers mention how being a little bit crazy, that discomfort is actually should build courage, and that's exactly what it did. And someone at that point told me, if you're a little scared, it's probably worth doing. So I jumped into AI. So how does that apply to my role at Facebook now? So AI is actually core to Facebook. At our family of apps, it's used throughout them, and we've deployed it at scale. It's an important technology at our company, and we continue to think about it as we build products, and we work with the product teams throughout the company. Here's one example. So your newsfeed and ads customization is actually using AI, and we try to provide an experience to over 2.7 billion users on a monthly basis that's relevant to them. We also try to filter out any ads and content that might not be relevant. So I have to tell you, I'm wearing Rothy's. I don't know how many of you are familiar with them. They're vegan shoes made out of plastic water bottles. So my husband, who's vegan, loves this and lets me spend way more than reasonable on a pair of shoes or an amount of shoes. And also, they're super comfortable from running around huge campuses, such as Facebook. And I would have never known about them had it not been for an ad on my Facebook feed. Other things, Warby Parker glasses that I'm wearing. The ads ranking algorithms knew that I was interested in quality glasses that were fashionable and affordable. So earlier I mentioned that I immigrated to the US. So I have family all around the world. How do you communicate with them? And with natural language understanding, neural machine translations, we're able to build communities across languages. And currently, this technology powers more than 6 billion translations a day. Another really important part, and I talked about having a positive social impact globally as well as our users, and making our products accessible. Here's an example of computer vision understanding images and relaying what's in them for the visually impaired. Next, so how many of you believe recommendations in restaurants from a total stranger versus your friend who you know is a foodie? By using natural language understanding again in systems, they can show posts that are relevant to you from people you know and trust. That's the next one. So I talked a little bit about AI for social good and thinking about blood donation matching. This is another understanding the language and putting donors together with those needing them. We've actually signed up over 50 million people here. I'm going to turn to a completely different space, integrity. AI tools for content understanding also help to proactively identify and remove inappropriate policy-violating content. That includes share baiting, spam, pornography, and bullying. For example, these tools help us block and remove approximately 1 million accounts a day. I don't know how many of you have seen this. How many of you know about the Portal video conferencing units that Facebook produces? Some of you? So it's a device that has a smart camera in it, and it uses computer vision models running locally on the device. So it's not sending it anywhere, your videos anywhere to be changing. And you can see it following this person on the screen. And what's interesting here is I have, my father-in-law has mobile, he's kind of mobilely challenged at this point, he has a disability, and when my son communicates with him across the country, it's really hard when you have a kid fidgeting a little bit, moving out of the picture, and my father-in-law can't move the camera, it's really hard. Now they can talk almost like they're in the same room. So it's enabled us to connect right to the mission of what Facebook does, allowing us to connect with others. And the last example I have here of technology is Oculus. So experiencing interactive VR with your own hands without having to hold controllers or wear gloves. And you can imagine how much cool cred I get with my kid now when he thinks this is what I work on. It's lots of progress from being daddy's boss. So I talked a lot about what we do with AI, but how do we actually do that? Behind all the work that I've mentioned are huge collaborations that happen both internally and with the external community, including with academia. Here's some examples. So Fast MRI. For anyone that's had an MRI before, it could be a pretty uncomfortable situation. It takes time, you're in a confined space, you have to keep really still, and that's just hard. So we collaborated with the NYU School of Medicine to create and investigate how do you make MRI scans 10 times faster. But what's really interesting about this project is everything we gathered, we made publicly available through a data set so others can continue this research and move it forward. We see a lot of value of working with academia and the broader community. Another example is the Deepfake Detection Challenge that we launched late last year. This was a challenge that brought the community together from multiple industry partners, academics, civil society organizations, and media partners like BBC and New York Times. And what we were doing is trying to identify manipulated media, in particular deepfakes. Together, we released the largest data set of its kind, again, to allow researchers in the broader community to help us research and come together for a problem we're all seeing. We also collaborate within the company. It's not just with external partners. I talked a little bit about engineering. We have a fundamental AI research team, and we have an applied research team that work together in partnership. We're supported by design teams, product management, and analytics. And it's really a group effort to get our projects done. And as we decide what we're going to do, data really informs those decisions. We bring data into the ideation process, use it to power our opportunity sizing, and enhance it via learning plans. We set up the right metrics and countermetrics to ensure our products are achieving the outcome we desired. And we try to understand the growth that drives and setting the right targets to ensure that we reach the maximum scale we can. And finally, and I think really exciting to me, is knowing when it's time to imagine the future and understand the behaviors that will be present later on and amplified with our research. So what is the biggest challenge for me right now? And I think it's this creating AI responsibly. You must have heard about it today and throughout the last 2 days, and it's really at the heart of everything we do. At Facebook, we're using AI to benefit billions of people around the world. And to do that well, we need to ensure that the system works fairly and equally for everyone involved. So what's my role today? This is basically pretty much the same slide, but now I actually know what I'm doing. And it still revolves around people and programs operations, setting up an organization that allows innovation to happen freely, open research to happen. My team now supports PyTorch, which is Facebook's platform for ML and open source as well. We work on fairness and responsible AI throughout the company. It is not just the Facebook AI team's responsibility. And we continue to work within AI for social impact and making sure that everything we do has a global impact as well as helping our users day to day. And I'll leave the talk with one more example for you all. This is a picture of some of the posters we see around the campus. As you walk around our campus, there's tons of posters everywhere. You see some examples here of nothing at Facebook is someone else's problem. Fail harder. Proceed and be bold. And these are some of the examples you see. And for me, although it's a big company and I come from another big company, it has the spirit of being almost like a startup, of do something bold. And when I walk in every day, what I remind myself is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? It's on many of our posters, actually, and I encourage you to do the same. So thank you for having me here today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ariana. That was absolutely very fascinating. See, now I know more about AI than just possible, thinking it was Alan Iverson. We've had over 50 companies pitch over the past 2 days, and I'm delighted to welcome Alex Gordon first back to the stage, our director of the startup program, who is going to be announcing the startup of the year on our program. Let's welcome Alex Gordon first.
Hello, how's everyone doing? Still got energy at the end of the second day? Yeah, come on. We're about to announce Startup of the Year, come on. Woo! Woo! I love that, thank you. So, as you all know, Startup Grind is the world's largest community of startups. So what better platform onto which we can build a startup program, a program to support companies with all of the network and the resources that we have across the world. So what I wanted to do just before we actually go into the award, and where I tell you kind of what the winners get and how we work with them, and obviously who they are, just want to run through some numbers from last year. So the program is evolving every year, and it's getting more and more competitive every year. So last year was a great program. Absolutely loved it. We had some fantastic companies, and I'll tell you what some of the companies, or the 2 companies who won, have done in a minute. But just before we do that, so last year we had 3,100 applications for 337 selected startups. And those companies were from 57 countries and 33 industries. So I am super excited about what we're building here. I think it's a very, very powerful, impactful, exciting and diverse program. I absolutely love speaking to all the people from all over the world. You know, when we're just about to come on and pitch, every single time we kind of lining up in the alley there, just kind of preparing. And I just get to chat to them all, you know, Argentina, it might be Romania, it might be Ukraine, it might be obviously the USA, it might be UK. And they're all kind of sharing in the same goals, the same aspirations, the same kind of almost illogical belief that they can transform an industry, but they probably will. You know, it's absolutely amazing and it's so inspiring. My passion is helping people who want to create things that are going to be impactful and change the world. So this is the best role that I could possibly have. So that was last year. Just to give you, once again, obviously Finn talked there about having 54 companies pitching today. Those are the Accelerate companies. And what Accelerate is the top 50 companies that exhibit at the global conference. And then at Europe conference, it's a smaller conference, so we have another 20. So last year, we had 90 Accelerate startups onboarded to our program across the global, European, and APAC conferences. And that works out with 3,100 applications. Don't test my maths here, at 2.9%. Did this just before I came on, and they're from 25 different countries. So obviously intensely competitive. The way that we choose these companies, obviously we have a wide variety of people in the Startup Grind ecosystem. We have, obviously, the Startup Grind team. We have the community of directors themselves across the world in 120 plus different countries. We've got so many investors and speakers and partners that come along as well. So when the companies apply, they do a second, longer form application where they tell us about their product, their market, their team, their ambition and fundraising strategy, growth strategy, and so on. And we go through those meticulously to define which ones we think are the best companies. So what do we do with the companies outside of conference? Obviously, you've seen them pitching. Some of them are doing panels. They're meeting investors and partners and exhibiting in the tents and all the benefits that come with that as well. We're also building this program to support them on what is a very lonely journey as a founder or a founding team when you're trying to take over the world and disrupt an industry. So, you know, with the 90 Accelerate companies that you saw there last year after the conference, we've got the 3 pillars of the program, which are education, network building, and exposure. And just to give you a kind of a rough idea of what we did with them, you can see there are 20 webinars and virtual events. The way that we do that is essentially ask the founders what they need to learn, what they want to learn, what they're struggling with, and we try and match them essentially with someone who can help them do that. So obviously there's coaching and there's one-to-one meetings with mentors, but there's also these webinars where we actually run kind of one-to-many, and it might be 10, it might be 15. It's still very, very curated. And we've also been doing virtual events as well with a company called Tio. It's really, really cool because it's a remote program with people all over the world. Obviously, the network building pillar comes with investor and partner meetings. We did 500 introductions after the conference last year between, you know, chapter directors as companies are expanding, to investors when people are looking to raise money and so on. And then finally on the exposure pillar, these companies are doing great things. So they're being covered in Forbes, in TechCrunch, in the Next Web, in Yahoo. So, you know, just keep looking out for these companies and seeing what they'll do because it's really inspiring. Just before we go into the announcement of this year's winners, just to show you what the companies did, we stood here on this very stage a year ago and awarded 8base the Grind Startup of the Year award and IOTAS the Growth Award. 8base were accepted into Techstars in November, Techstars Austin. They're really excited about that. They're doing super well, and I've seen a lot of media coverage talking about what they're doing. And we got IOTAS as well, who've raised an 8.5 million Series A with Intel and Liberty Global. So it's really cool to be part of the journey with these companies and to work with these founders. And I'm looking forward to doing the same with our team and the founders of the companies that we're going to announce today. So just before we do that, the Global 2020 numbers, so that's just this conference. You remember last year we had 3,100 in the whole year. We had 4,000 for this conference alone this year from 133 countries. That was mind-blowing when I first found that out. 323 startups you've seen exhibit. That shows again that that's down at around 8% that were out of the 4,000. So it's getting increasingly competitive, which is obviously pushing the quality up for us as well, which is great. And these coming from 49 countries. Accelerate numbers of the companies that Finn was talking about there having pitched and taken part in Accelerate. 54 from 19 countries, and you can see there at 1.35% of all applicants. So it came from 2.9% of making it onto Accelerate to 1.35% this year. So what do the winners get? Well, we've talked there about the 3 pillars of the program that we're building here: the education pillar, the network building pillar, and exposure. I'm not going to go into detail in kind of how we work with these companies. Obviously, again, we've got our baseline set of things that we work with them with, but we also work with them kind of to develop things based on how they want to expand. So it's kind of tailored as well. On the education thing, just to give you an example, one of the first things we'll do after this conference is make an introduction between the founder and our founder and CEO, Derek Anderson, who's obviously got a wide network and a lot of experience that he can help these companies with. So that's an example of the education pillar. Network building, obviously, we've talked about as they look to raise and as they expand, maybe geographically, we use our community in 120 countries to help them, introduce them to people who have local knowledge and expertise, as one example. And exposure is essentially using our platform to amplify their message. So here we are on Grind Startup of the Year. Before I do this, I'd love to bring on my team. Jamila, Ayush, Naman, Imogen, would you like to come on? Can we give them a massive round of applause, because I could not do this without them. In addition to everything that Startup Grind does and all the different teams, the people who run the conference, the people who run the community, and so on and so on. This is my team, so I wanted to bring them out for the award that we're about to give. So what we've done is we've narrowed it down from the 25 Accelerate Grind startups to a top 3. And you can see here that the, obviously, Evolve being in the energy industry, we've got My Personal Therapeutics in the healthcare and biotech industry, and Flatfile in the enterprise SaaS industry. So again, just showcasing the sort of diversity that we have on the program. So let's do it. Can we get a drum roll? I'd love if you guys could all give us a drum roll. And the audience, come on, and the audience. And the winner of the 2020 Grind Startup of the Year is Evolve Energy. We've got Evolve. Oh, here. Hey, man. Congratulations. So congratulations to Evolve. Without putting you on the spot, I would love to put you on the spot and ask you to just do another 1-minute pitch. If you could just remind people what you do, that'd be amazing. Thanks, Mike.
Great, happy to do that. So hi everyone, my name is Michael Lee with Evolve Energy. At Evolve, we can save our energy customers up to 50% on their electricity costs and truly decarbonize their footprint. And the way we do this is that we enable them to get access to what's called wholesale power prices, which dynamically change but are really, really low price. And then as we see those energy prices spike, we shift their usage to cheaper times. Coincidentally, these cheaper times are because there's a lot of renewable energy on the grid, and so we're actually aligning their consumption to when wind and solar are producing, and then shedding load as we see a lot of fossil fuels that are really expensive and really dirty come onto the grid. So ultimately, we're looking to scale. We just launched in Texas 2 months ago. We have customers doubling almost every single month and 97% retention rate, even though we don't have any long-term contracts. And we're really looking forward to disrupting the energy industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. If you could just stay on stage, we'll do the growth one and we'll get a picture all together as well. Fantastic. So now we come on to Growth Startup of the Year. So I would say, arguably, this was even more competitive. You know, some incredible companies. We spent so long looking at the growth companies. You can see here we've got Hello Package, which is in the logistics and transportation space. We've got Swit Technologies here in the enterprise SaaS space, and Jiva more in the connectivity and telecommunications space. So without further ado, let's do another drum roll. We can do it better this time. Come on. And the winner is of the Growth Startup of the Year 2020, Swit Technologies. Welcome, Swit. So let's do the same again. Swit, we'd love to hear, once again, if you could just give everyone a refresher on what Swit does.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Josh, CEO at Swit. We provide enterprises with a team collaboration platform that seamlessly combines team chat like Slack with task management like Trello in one convenient place. So you could turn your conversation into trackable task, and you could share your task to chat channel simply by drag and drops. So we could finally move different workflows, maintaining context and data. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we'll do a picture all together. Do you want to come on? Let's do a quick picture. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.
A massive congratulations to Evolve Energy and Swit, and to, of course, every single company that participated in the startup program. You know, this is not just a conference thing, but something that you have the opportunity to benefit from throughout the rest of the year and beyond, especially as we have chapters all around the world. So 6 years ago was the first time I visited the Bay Area. And I remember being out in Palo Alto, and one of the things that really fascinated me with these kind of like autonomous vehicles, right? The ones with the cameras, and you're like, we're now literally living in the future. And it's exciting to see where autonomous vehicles has come. In our next Fireside Chat, we have the founder and co-founder and CEO of Aurora, who are delivering the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quick, and broadly. Chris will be in conversation with Mike Volpe, a partner at Index Ventures. Let's give them a massive Startup Grind welcome to Chris and Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. If any of you have been following the movement around self-driving cars, the industry, and all the startups, Chris will need no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. The first time I actually met Chris, he was on stage and I was in the audience. It was TED 2013.
Really?
And yeah, exactly. Yeah. You were pretty good. Chris gave a talk about self-driving cars, which at the time was a pretty abstract concept, to say the least. Chris, turns out, had been working already for 6 or 7 years, I think, on self-driving cars. He was famous for the original work done at Carnegie Mellon University at the DARPA Challenge, where they made the first sort of suburban and urban assault vehicles that drove themselves.
That was not what we were doing.
If I had a photo for you, I could show you one that was flipped upside down. He then joined Google, where he led the self-driving project there, and he was CTO of the program until 2016. And finally, after a lot of cajoling from a lot of venture capitalists like me, he decided to launch his own company to do it, which is Aurora. I've had the fortune of being on Chris's board for almost 3 years now. Some of us like to call him the Henry Ford of self-driving cars. He gets embarrassed when I say that, but
Excellent.
It's okay.
It's going to be that kind of talk.
And so it's a real privilege to actually be able to put him on the spot today and ask him some questions. So, Chris, I'm going to start with this. There have been a lot of promises made about this technology and when it's actually going to be ready. There are people right now out there who are saying we're giving rides, commercial rides to people with it. You are known for taking a bit more of a conservative position on when the technology is actually going to be ready. So, when is this thing actually going to be ready, and when is somebody from the audience here going to be able to flag a Uber that has a self-driving system in it and jump in and drive around?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Mike. And it's a privilege to be on stage with you. A lot of fun. So yes, I've had the privilege of working in this space for 17 years, which means you should have found someone smarter and better to fund. But I think it's exciting to see, right? We've been working at this technology for a long time, and we're now starting to see it on the cusp of being commercially viable. So if you go to Arizona today, and you're one of the fortunate few, you could get a ride in a car with nobody behind the steering wheel. The team that I helped build at Google is doing that, and that's really exciting to see. I think over the next 5 years, we're going to see hundreds to small thousands of these vehicles out in the world. And there'll be parts of fleets, and those fleets will be moving people, and they'll be delivering goods. And that'll be a chance for us to kind of get over that MVP hurdle and understand, do we have a technology that works, and start to find product market fit, start to understand the business model, and then, start to see it happen. And then over the second half of the coming decade, we're going to see this technology really start to scale and, have a much broader impact in people's lives.
Now, everybody knows that there's a lot of players in this business. There's Google, which has now been renamed Waymo. Uber's doing a program. There's Cruise. There's Zoox. There's all these. Talk a little bit about the philosophy that you took in building Aurora and how you are different than a variety of these other players in the market.
Yeah, so I think like the different part comes back to like we know what we're doing. We think that's one of the differentiators.
Important, I would say.
It matters. So we've been really fortunate to pull together this amazing group of people who have done this before at different places. And so as we're building Aurora, we really think about it as version 2.0 of the technology. So I had the privilege of leading the Google team for many years. One of my co-founders, Sterling, he was at MIT doing this type of research and then went to a couple places and went to Tesla and launched Autopilot and Model X for them. Drew Backnell is a Carnegie Mellon professor in machine learning and robotics and helped found the Uber ATG and helped get that program off the ground. And so the three of us kind of understand what it takes to solve this problem and have got this kind of scars to prove it. And so as we're building technology now, we're thinking about what do you have to build to actually make a product, not how do I get over the next little hump in the road that we might discover out there testing. So I think that's a big differentiator. And then we've got, we've made some really cool progress on virtual test tools, so we can develop much more quickly than we could a decade ago, which is empowering. And then we've bought this company that makes this really fancy LiDAR that unlocks our ability to see further than other people can, and not just see further, but see better, and that we can see not just where stuff is in the world, but how fast it's moving towards us or away from us instantaneously. And we think that really unlocks the power of what we're building.
Now, one aspect that's somewhat different about Aurora is that you're an independent company.
Yeah.
And many of your competitors are subsidiaries of big auto companies. Cruise is a subsidiary of GM. Argo is a subsidiary of Ford. You have Waymo that's part of Google. But you've chosen a path of staying independent. Why is that an advantage? Or maybe it's a disadvantage. Why have you
definitely not a disadvantage.
Why have you chosen that path, and what are the pros and cons of it?
Yeah, so we've been building the company from day one as an independent company, right? We didn't build it with smoke and mirrors to flip it. We built it because we believe in our mission to deliver the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. And the way to do that is to, A, focus on the thing we can do better than anyone else in the world, and that is build the driver. And to have that kind of focus, it means we've got to do one thing, right? We don't want to be part of some tech company that's making money selling ads or phones or whatever. Let's have a business that's really about the thing we care about. And we think that focus is a power. And then beyond that, that driver that we're building, we think can impact the world broadly. It can drive little compact electric cars, it can drive minivans, it could drive box trucks, it could drive big Class 8 trucks. And so we can build a platform that supports all parts of the transportation ecosystem. We can partner with our vehicle partners, whether they're making trucks or cars, and support them in building their business. And then we can support the people who use drivers and need to get something from one place to another, whether it's a person or a thing. And so whether that's a taxi company or Uber or Lyft, we can support them. Or if it's a logistics company or a shipper like an Amazon or a FedEx or a Google, or sorry, a UPS or a Walmart. And by being independent, we can actually work across all of those companies, which we think is really important to having the impact in the world we want.
Now, there's a lot of sort of, I'd call it micro-segmentation that's happening in the industry, where people are saying, oh, I'm doing self-driving trucks, and I'm doing self-driving urban delivery vehicles, and I'm doing robo-taxis. And so is that a valid segmentation? Is it really that different? Or is it, you're obviously not taking that approach, so.
Yeah, so on the one hand, focus matters, right? We believe that, and so if you can pick a product and really delve into that by itself, then, I can see some advantage to that. We think that the right path is to build a driver, because really the hard part of the self-driving problem is not plugging it into the car. And being able to speak Japanese if it's a Toyota and speaking German if it's a VW. The hard part is understanding the world around the vehicle and figuring out how to move through it. So let's focus on that, and then let's leverage solving the hard part of the problem by doing a bit of work across these different applications. So we think that's the right path. One of the ones I think is kind of entertaining is not fair, but one of the ones where I think the thesis is flawed is trucking. So a couple of years ago, the wisdom was, hey, we're going to go build a self-driving truck company because that's way easier than building, something to drive around downtown San Francisco. And the problem with that thesis, of course, is that most of the time they're right. If you drive from here to LA down I-5, not a whole lot happens. It's pretty easy. The problem is that sometimes it does happen. Something interesting does happen. And when it does, if you're 70,000 pounds of load moving at 78 miles an hour, the kinetic energy is profound. If you compare that to two cars bumping into each other at 25 miles per hour in a neighborhood. So it's higher risk. And then the other thing is, most of the time nothing happens. And if nothing's happening, then you're not learning anything. And so you're not taking that opportunity to advance the technology. So again, if you take I-5 from San Francisco to LA, right, maybe one thing interesting happens or nothing. If we spend time driving downtown Palo Alto or Redwood City or San Francisco, basically once a minute something interesting happens. So we're learning orders of magnitude faster than folks in the trucking space. And so we think as this Aurora Driver, we'll learn where it's easy to learn rapidly and safely to learn rapidly, and then we'll be able to apply that into things like trucking.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the things that's hard about this business you're in is measuring progress. Yeah. If I'm selling a SaaS product that has subscription, I can just count the number of subscriptions or the growth rate or whatever. Yeah. But you're working on a pretty fundamental technology, which takes a long time to build. And so there's a bunch of metrics out there that people cite, right? They talk about numbers of miles driven. They talk about disengagement rates from practice drivers and whatnot. Are those the right ways to measure progress in the industry? How are you doing on those?
Yeah.
If you want to comment on that?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Should we be looking at an entirely different way of measuring progress?
Yeah, we don't think those are great numbers to look at. And I can tell you kind of where they came from. So way back in the day when I was running the Google program, we had a bunch of cars out driving. And so we had a bunch of miles. And so we said, oh, we drove a bunch of miles. And everybody was excited. And then that kind of became the de facto way of measuring it. In practice, we think that's a terrible way to measure it because, one, again, if take the I-5 example, driving down I-5 for the most part is not that hard, and so you don't learn much, and so maybe it works really well there, but that's not actually going to help solve the broader driving problem. And so at Aurora, our strategy is be super efficient about the way we use our testing on road. Go to the places where we can learn rapidly. That means that we're going to end up disengaging more often because it's a more interesting environment and we're learning. And then the other is to really put a bunch of emphasis on virtual development tools, virtual testing tools. So, a really interesting number. So our vehicles now can make left turns across traffic, so unprotected left turns. This is one of these hard things to do because you have to estimate the distance in traffic, you have to find gaps and make the turn. Well, for us, we didn't just kind of throw it out on the road and hope and see what happened. We first had our human drivers go out and make a bunch of these maneuvers so we can kind of understand the characteristics of them. And then we built a bunch of simulations and different tests that allowed us to understand, to develop software against. And in fact, we made something like 2.25 million left turns in simulation before we ever actually tried it on the real world. And so, you can imagine if it took us 2.5 million iterations, how long it would take us to have a car, drive around the block and learn. And B, by doing it in simulation first, we didn't have to put the public at risk. We didn't have to put our team at risk. We could try all kinds of things out. So we don't think the metrics that are out there are really, the right ones to use. Internally, we look at all kinds of things. We measure all sorts of stuff. We measure how long does it take us to take software and put it on the car because that does affect the cycle time. We measure, we have this whole suite of simulation tests, both for kinodynamic simulation of the movement of the car, but also simulation of sensor data. And we ask, how does the vehicle perform against those? And we can kind of pre-develop tests. And then as we're thinking about rolling a feature out, have confidence at what limits we can put on it in the real world.
But realistically, if you're an outside observer, because a lot of the things that you're talking about there are internal measurements, you're not going to necessarily share them with the rest of the world. So if you're an external observer to this industry, what should you be paying attention to?
Yeah, and it's extremely difficult, right? I look out at the other folks working in the space, and I have a sense of where they are, but it's hard to measure objectively. I think you look at the quality of the team, because that's the horsepower that's going to ultimately execute, and then you look at the thoughtfulness of what they put out in the world about how they're solving the problem. I think those are kind of the best ways to look at it.
Okay, so you were one of the originators of the LiDAR usage of LiDAR technology. I'm going to assume that most of the audience knows what LiDAR is. If not, there's always Google for you.
Yep.
There's another very famous person in this industry. His name starts with Elon, who says that LiDARs are stupid. Humans drive with eyes.
It's a fool's errand.
Cars should drive with cameras.
Yeah.
Can you please respond to that?
Please respond. Thanks, Mike. I'd be happy to. And there's some reporters here, right? So I disagree respectfully. So it is very beguiling, right? People drive around with two eyes. They're obviously not LiDAR. And so there's an existence proof that it can be done. I actually latch onto a different quote, which was by Alex Comparthy, who said, LiDAR is a crutch. It's a way to avoid solving some problems with the camera. And I say, exactly. Right? Like, we are not scientists about this, right? We're not purists. We're actually trying to get a product out into the market to make the roads safer, to make them more accessible, to make the more efficient and less costly to get goods around. So we're going to find whatever technological advantage we can, right? I think about, we're pretty convinced the right way to travel is on things with wheels, whether they're bicycles or cars. Well, it turns out, I was born with legs. Probably many people here were born with legs, and right, that's what nature evolved to get us around. So, if we said that we shouldn't drive cars because they don't have legs, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense.
Very fair. We got 5 minutes, and I want to ask you two questions, Chris. The first one, it's a bigger issue that people often sort of brush aside when they're talking about AI and machine learning, but the fact is that the technology you're developing will endanger the jobs of people who drive today. Truck drivers, taxi drivers, and so forth. And that's their livelihood. How do you think about that problem?
Yeah, I think first it's real. That we're developing a technology that I deeply believe will have a massively positive impact on society. If you look in the US at 38,000 Americans who died last year on our roads, globally 1.25 million people, the status quo is broken. If you look at the accessibility, right, for 6 million Americans, they don't have the same privileges of getting around that many of you here do, that you can get in a vehicle and drive it. So giving them access is profoundly important. We can reduce the costs, right? So traffic accidents in the US are something like an $800 billion to $1 trillion drag on the US economy. So there's a massive economic, social, personal benefit to self-driving vehicles. At the same time, there are people whose livelihood depends on it. And it is a really tough conversation around kind of the broader good of the many over the few. And how do we, as a society, come together to support those people and transition them? Now, at the same time, there's a lot of room for hope here. So one example where automation came into industry and actually increased the labor pool is the automated teller. So when the ATM machine was invented, the concern was that suddenly there'd be this whole class of people, bank tellers, who would not have jobs anymore. And what happened was, because the ATM made it cheaper to open a branch, there were more branches. And the branches needed more bank branches. There was more bank branches, so there was more people employed as tellers. And the tellers moved from basically the L side of it, right, just their job being to effectively take checks in and hand money out, to actually creating value for the companies and selling additional products and whatnot. So there's now more bank tellers employed today than there was prior to the ATM being invented. And I think in our space, by reducing the cost and friction of transportation, by making it safer, there will be an elastic effect where we expand transportation to some degree. And I think that will create all kinds of new opportunities, but we have to find ways to support these people through that transition. The last thing I would end with, maybe two more points. So one is, many of these jobs are pretty tough, right? If you think about truck driving, one, there's a 70,000 person shortage of truck drivers in the United States. So it's not a particularly desirable job for most people. And then the life expectancy for people who drive trucks is lower than the average substantially. And so we should be kind of asking the question over the long term, is this a job we really want people to do, or is this a job where we'd rather find ways to automate it and allow those, that part of society to operate somewhere else? So it's a difficult question. It's one that we can't solve by ourselves as a company. We have to engage with the broader elements of society and government.
That's great. Last thought, Chris. A lot of people in the audience here are running their own startups. You have a particularly, I would say, complex task of running your business because you have a product that is going to take from the inception of your business probably 5 years before you ever ship anything that people will use. And there's a large group of people. How many people work at Aurora now?
440, 450-ish.
So you're managing a large group of people with a product that will take a long time to build.
Yep.
And so I want you to talk about your approaches to leadership and culture when faced with your type of problem of managing this business. In a minute.
In a minute. One, impart wisdom in a minute.
No,
30
no,
seconds. So I think what we've been trying to build at Aurora is an environment where great people kind of work together with very low egos. So our problem is not something where we can have kind of a hero hacker in a corner, throw together a demo overnight, and then suddenly have 40,000 users the next day, right? As Mike said, this is a many-year investment. And the problem is broad, right? We hire all the different kinds of engineers, but then we have to work on government relations, and because we have all those engineers, we have to have high-quality human resource people. So it's really about recognizing that what we're doing is a team sport, and so one of our core values is we have no jerks. We have a rule: no jerks at the company, and it matters because we have to be in it for the long haul. It is a team sport. They have to be able to work together, and we've been successful in hiring world-class people across our organization. And so it may be that you're really good at the thing you do, and it's different than the person who sat next to you. And if you don't respect them, if you're kind of your ego gets in the way, then they're not going to be able to perform at their best, and we're going to fail. So keeping the team high horsepower, high quality people, but humble, I think it's been a core part of how we've been successful so far.
And I imagine that having a vision that says 40,000 people a year die on the roads in the United States, and if we fix this problem, that will be reduced in half or even less, has got to be motivating to the people that come to work every day.
Absolutely, and I think that's the other thing that I think about when we build a team is you need to have two things. Well, there's three things I think about for employees. One is they need a mission they believe in that's meaningful in the world. The second is they have to have a job that they're excited about and great people to work with. And the third is you have to pay them in a way that's not embarrassing, that's fair, because everybody has crappy days. And so the mission is the thing that gets you through the crappy days. But if every day is crappy, it doesn't matter what the mission is. You're going to go find something else to do. And then if you're not being paid fairly, then why are you there? It's a job after all.
Chris, we're out of time, but I just want to thank you. It's a true privilege to be able to work with you, not just because of the great mission, but because of the great person that you are. And more people should come work for you, in case you're wondering.
If you're looking, we are hiring.
And just thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, and good luck on the journey over the next few years.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris and Mike. As it so happens, we do actually have a journalist in the building, but there you go. For a lot of startups at the end of the day, the goal is to kind of build your first MVP, get some traction, and then ultimately kind of get it to become a huge, huge, huge company. And the fact of the matter is, Uber has essentially become that. It's essentially become a verb, right, for ride hailing. We have extremely fortunate to actually have the Chief Technology Officer of Uber, Tuan Pham. He'll be in conversation with Rory Ketlin-Jones, technology correspondent for the BBC. They'll be discussing maintaining startup velocity while building mature and reliable systems. Let's give a massive Startup Grind welcome to Tuan and Rory.
Thank you very much, Finn. And Finn has done an amazing job there because he came to my surname, which turned out to be the bigger linguistic challenge than Tuan's, and he cleared the hurdle brilliantly. So thank you very much. Tuan Pham, extraordinary job at one of the most extraordinary companies on earth, making waves around the world. I come from London, where Uber has been a constant source of excitement and controversy for many years. I'm going to start with a really naive question. So, Uber's magic sauce, the very basis of the business, the very basis of the innovation, is the app which connects drivers to customers. And I'm going to be really naive and say that that app was created before you arrived at the company, and you're still one of the very early employees at the company. Developed years ago. Your job is pretty simple. All you have to do is keep it ticking over. Not much to it, right?
That's what all my family members say ever since I joined the company. It seemed to work. What did it need you for? So, yeah, but my answer to them and to everyone is it's like you look at the iceberg, right? The stuff that above the waterline is only about 10% of it, right? Most of the mass of that iceberg is underneath the waterline. And for our technology stack, it's very similar. If you look at the app, it's really cool, it's sexy, it's very intuitive. You know, you understand how things work. You push a button, you get a car. You push a button, you know, food get delivered to you, all that. But underneath that, to make that work beyond that, you know, that app, is a lot of technology. Right?
And presumably users I know as a user, at first, users are bewitched by it and think this is incredible. And very quickly they get used to it and say, hey, those little cars that are circling around, they're not really there. This is not happening. So you've constantly, I suppose, got to improve.
Well, when you open the app, and we basically show the nearest 8 cars around the position.
And they're really there, are they?
They're there. They're practical. Of course, they are always a little time delay. You know, that was the last time we know they were there, and could be a 15-second delay, 30-second delay from where they actually are, but they're actually definitely in the vicinity. And what happened is, underneath all the technology underneath the app, is the first thing you see is the positioning of the car, the matching, right? Who are the riders, where that person is located, where are the nearest car, and it's not just the nearest car in terms of the flying distance, but it's actually based on routing, right? You could be the nearest car, but heading away from that passenger on the one-way street that would take much longer to loop back. So the algorithm factored all of that stuff in. Lately, we even have features where we match drivers and riders based on safety criteria, right, to increase the safety of our platform as well. And then beyond that, there's routing, right, and there's tracking of the trip as it make progress. Then you have to have billing and payment. You have to bill the riders and pay the drivers. Then you have all the analytics behind that to do fraud detections. You do all of these things, all the technology to actually make just that very simple app really work.
What's complicated about the business is these different constituencies you've got to the business has got to please. Drivers, customers, investors, regulators.
Yes.
Are you clear, as the man effectively in charge of the app, who your core audience is, who you've got to make it better for? Because the balance between drivers and customers is incredibly important to the drive towards profitability.
I have to, and even in the technology team, have to serve multiple masters. Right? Clearly, our riders and drivers are very important to us. Right? Without our drivers are our direct customers because they are the ones subscribed to the platform, right? Generating revenue on the platform. The riders are technically their customers, right? We are the market maker, the platform in between that actually make that facilitate and make the transaction happen. Of course, we operate in many cities around the world, hundreds of cities around the world, and we have to always be mindful of regulations that we have to comply with. So we have to serve that interest as well.
When have you got it wrong in terms of the app?
Well,
which at some stages, drivers have felt that, the balance was against them.
Well, I'm not sure if it's the app. Where do we have wrong? I think one of the things that we do is sometimes we have a product such as Black Car, which drivers really love at a time, right? And then when we release the next level of product, UberX, it's much cheaper price. It tend to cannibalize part of the premium product that we had, and some drivers got unhappy. And also depends on times of day. The prices fluctuate based on the dynamic of the market. Some drivers feel like they are making really good money at some times and not so much at other times. So there's a lot of these fluctuations. It's very, very hard to put a pin on it.
And does the feedback, which obviously is constant, come to you in the technical team when people think it's going wrong, the balance is wrong? There are waves of, you can see it on Twitter, customer dissatisfaction. I ordered an Uber, it cancelled. It's not fair. I'm being deceived by the company.
Well, I don't think the company ever deceived anyone, but you look at Twitter. But if you look at I can't comment on any specific Twitter message. But if you look at the amount of volume that we
how much pressure that puts on you, does that feedback come through to the team designing the app?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Right.
Experience.
When our customers cannot get a ride because of driver cancellations or when search get too high and that's kind of price them out of that ride, we certainly feel that pain, and we certainly engineer the system as much as we can in terms of product features, reliability, so that we optimize that to ensure that as many people can ride as possible and as many people can drive as and earn as much as possible with that time.
Now you're facing increasing competition in my city again in London. The Indian app Ola is just arriving. To what degree do you think the quality of your app versus the quality of their app will be decisive?
I think in the long run, let's say if you subtract out all the incentive, right, then the product, which is the app and the service behind that, I think in the long run, the one with the better product and better service would win in the long run, right? And
is that
of
true?
course, in the short term, you can always buy market share by giving a lot of incentive and drive up your market position.
Is that true? I look back some years to the London market again, and there was an app called Halo, which was really good, and people said that was fantastic. That was a company that raised $150 million in the UK, and that was seen as an extraordinary amount of money. Then Uber came along, and Uber ended up raising something like $8 billion. Isn't actually the difference the sheer weight of capital behind you, that you don't have to be, you're given more time to be the winner than people with less access to capital. In other words, access to capital is the key rather than technology.
If we had that, we had the $8 billion. If we did not build the right product, people wouldn't use us, though, right? So I think I remember the competition with Halo. As far as I know, right, people in London really like the Uber brand and Uber service and Uber rides, and that's why we had very significant growth there. And I believe fundamentally competition is actually very healthy. We have to compete fiercely everywhere that we operate. Here in the U.S., in India, in London, in Europe, in Middle East, in some arena, we had to back out of that, such as China and Southeast Asia, after fierce competition. So I think ultimately, competition is actually healthy because it actually benefit the user of the service, both the riders and the driver side.
Do you think you're going to have to give up on some other markets? You know, you've mentioned some markets you've given up on already.
I hope not. I think our CEO basically have been very public about how strong we are in all the market that we currently are, and we intend to compete very well, and we intend to either be the number one or number two in all the markets.
Maintaining startup velocity is the title of this session. You could call that moving fast and breaking things. And that kind of sums up what happened in the early stages of Uber, and that caused a lot of problems. When you had a very public change of leadership, a very big change of tone. Has that affected what you do? Are you less inclined to break things now than maybe you were under the leadership of Travis Kalanick?
Well, every company grows, and under Dara, our number one mantra and cultural norm is we do the right thing. So if you look at
does that
all
suggest
about
you did the wrong thing before?
No, that doesn't imply that, right? You know, so
really,
yeah. I mean, yeah. Look, I'm a technologist, right? I focus most of my time on building technology with the engineering team. And you know, we basically put our heart and soul and skills into building the right product set to actually service customer. Now, if you are in a very early stage and you have to disrupt, particularly in market and industry, every disruption requires challenging some existing norms and rules, right, that are antiquated. You then look back at civil rights movement, any kind of disruption, disrupt status quo a little bit. Now, some of it might be right, some of it might be wrong. But I'm looking forward to you're asking the question about our cultural norms of doing the right thing. Under Dara, we absolutely have been extremely rigid and careful about following rules and regulations and do the right thing by our riders and drivers and our policymakers, and that's what we focus on. But from the technology standpoint, we still move incredibly fast and break lots of things all the time when it comes to the product stack. Right? It looked really calm on the surface because you open the app and it seemed to work all the time. But we are launching thousands of changes to our live site every single day. And with that kind of velocity, whether it's configuration changes or code changes or feature launches or experimentation, and many of those things don't work well and break. But you have to learn from that breakage and you move forward very, very fast and course correct on those things. But those things are completely mostly invisible to the public who actually use our service. And for us in technology, we're still moving incredibly fast, and we do break ourselves lots of times, sometimes multiple times during a day. So
now the key message from Dara Khosrowshahi lately has been about the path to profitability. Is that dependent on what you do as technologists? Or is it more dependent on bigger strategic decisions about, for instance, what commission you take from drivers, that kind of area, what countries you pull out of? Is technology going to take you to profit?
Absolutely, technology is one key part of that. Right now, for a company this diverse and this large, there is no single bullet. I think that many parts of the company has to be part of that solution. For example, if you give if you give too much incentive, then you burn too much money, then you're very far away from profitability. If you don't offer any incentive at all, then you lose market share and you can't grow, right? So that's on the business side. And on the operation side, how efficient you are, how much more you can do with what you have, increase our effectiveness, our capability, our leverage, right, and improve our bottom line. And from the product and technology perspective, incredibly important, because getting to profitability alone is not the only thing we worry about. We all worry about getting to profitability while driving sustained growth for years and decades to come. And that has to come from product innovation. What product can we invent
that open new market, that bring a cheaper, more economical way for people to move around the world beyond what we have today. We have today is carpooling is the cheapest one. Well, can we do higher capacity vehicle like bus, and can we partner with transit agencies around the cities around the world to actually help with that? There are many things that we experiment with that could potentially even open up the market for growth. Because what we were looking for is not simply profitability, because profitability with no growth is not all that interesting, and that's not what we're after. We want But profitability. one day you might be profitable. One day you might be profitable. In fact, if you look at our earning in our ride sharing, we already demonstrate that we are profitable. Right now, there are other parts of the business that are fast growing still that we have to fund as a company that cause us to be overall not quite profitable yet, but we already put the marker down where Dara already promised the world that by the Q4 of this year, 2020, for that quarter, we will reach profitability. And what I'm more looking beyond that is how do we get to that point and continue to grow, forever. And that's will require a lot of technology and a lot of innovation. Now, what's interesting about this is a couple of years ago, it seemed that the message from Uber is that profitability would actually depend on autonomy, on effectively taking the drivers out of the equation, and obviously removing a huge amount of cost that way. I know you. It seems strange that you're the Chief Technology Officer, but you're not responsible for the whole autonomous vehicle project. But why has that changed? Why is it no longer seen as that is the only path to profitability? I don't recall who said what, but I don't think that the only path to profitability has to be to driverless car. Now, any opinion I have about driverless cars, since I'm not responsible for it, is from the perspective of a casual, amateur observer, right? So I think in the future of autonomous vehicle, it could be however many years down the road, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, when it reaches scales and all that, it could bring in a whole new level of, it could open up and unlock the new generations of transport mode, right? And possibility that is very, very cheap because, these vehicles can be utilized at all hours of the day and all that. But I think that future is still pretty far away. But that cannot be the only path that we all get to profitability. In fact, many of our company in this space is already, getting close to profitability. But your company has been spending vast amounts on that mission. Has that diverted cash from, what you would still regard as the core mission, getting the basic technology which makes the whole system tick more smoothly? I trust the leadership of our company to make the proper, investment and allocation. And then from the technology stack for the core of the company, ride sharing, food delivery, all that, I think we have sufficient resources to get what we need done. How important, more broadly, is AI, machine learning, in what you're doing? It is big. The last 5 years, I have not met a single company that doesn't say AI is core to its business. Quite often, those claims seem to be massively overblown. But how important is it to you? AI is a pretty hot area and pretty hot buzzword these days. We do employ machine learning techniques in many parts of our product stack. In some ways that is actually not very important, but not visible to the public, right? For example, we use machine learning technique to do lots of fraud detection because there's lots of fraud that happen on a platform as large as ours when we're doing 20, 25 million transactions a day, right? And money is changing hands and all that stuff. There's a lot of fraud pattern, and we use machine learning to help us optimize routings and all that stuff in the hope to always aiming to decrease pickup time that actually improve customer experience. And then, that all these things that we can do, but it's not, our whole company is not about AI. We're using AI to actually enhance what we do. And I was talking to somebody who started a very well-known AI company a few days ago, and he said back in 2010, you could get AI experts for very little money because they were still emerging from the AI winter. Now they're all on six-figure starting salaries. Is that another pressure on the business, just getting the hold of the right talent?
Well, I think there's certainly a bit of a price premium on people with really deep AI expertise. Right? There are lots of engineers who claim to work on AI, whether they just touch a little bit of it, right, and they have it on the resume. But for the people who have really deep expertise in AI, yes, it does cost a little bit more, but I think it's worth it because actually it opened up new techniques for us to really improve our performance capabilities in a way that we wasn't achievable before.
And what sort of talent are you looking for and are you attracting? I mean, we've seen in Silicon Valley people move from Google to Facebook to Uber as each company has become fashionable. Is that still happening?
We have a tremendous, great set of engineers and a very high talent bar that rivals some of the best companies in this valley or anywhere. So we're really proud of that, and we can, at this point, still able to recruit very, very, very good talent. We do also lose some, right, to all these other companies that you mentioned as well. But I think that's just the nature of the valley. People these days actually move around quite a bit more than when I was growing up in this industry a couple of decades ago.
One growing feature of why people choose to work for certain companies is reputation. Now, Uber has been a company that's been much admired in many ways. Quite often it's not a company that's loved. How important is it to you that people should love Uber?
Well, of course, I love people to love Uber. I think people love the service, right? Certainly, because we see a lot of usage of our product. Our engineer, when they interview with us, really, really love their team and the company. I can say that unequivocally, right? That's why our retention rate is really high. Our talent bar is really high. Our recruitment is very, very effective. And a lot of it is because we actually do build a very good, strong engineering culture with great talent that people are actually empathetic and helpful to each other. And they have really meaningful work that they do. We all shows up every day voluntarily because we can go work anywhere else because the mission that we are on is really important. What we do is impacting 20, 25 million lives a day, right? And improve it for the better. People have the convenience of being push a button and go anywhere they want to at a moment's notice, get food delivered to them. People who are in between jobs or underemployed can get on the platform and drive. All these things, we feel like we actually bring a lot of value to people through what we do, and that's part of the stickiness.
We're running out of time. Just a final question. Are you personally prouder of working for Uber these days than you may have been 5 years ago? There has been a culture change at Uber. Do you feel better about the company now than you did then?
I feel just as good about a company now than I did then, right? The company went through many phases that I'm equally proud of. The early stage was just make things work when the product market fit was so good, and when you get to global expansion at a very rapid pace, that requires a different set of learning, a different set of problems you have to solve at scale with very little time. Even the crisis year, there was a lot of learning there too, right? Testing all of our commitment and resiliency, right? And grit, take it to the limit. And then the rebuilding phase from 2017 after data arrived to the moment of the IPO is another very interesting phase of challenge in the company, full of learning, at least for me and for many in the organization. And now we're embarking on the new phase here where how do we get to profitability and sustain growth for decades to come, right? And what kind of innovation do we do to kind of unlock that so that we aspire to be the next Amazon of the world? That chapter is yet to be written, and I'm incredibly excited about this, and I'm proud of every phase of the company. And that's part of the journey. I would not have traded this for anything else.
Great to hear from you, Tuan Pham. Thank you very much indeed.
Incredible. Thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. It's the end of the day, people. My last introduction. Did everyone have a good day? Excellent. And look, we couldn't be ending on a more appropriate topic and conversation entitled The Power of Community with Reddit, which has, well, you know, aside of Startup Grind, because Startup Grind has got an incredible community as well, right? But Reddit is considered to be one of the most, have the most passionate community ever. And we are extremely fortunate to have co-founder and CEO of Reddit, Steve Huffman. And joining him in the conversation is our very own co-founder and CEO, Derek Anderson. Let's welcome Steve and Derek to the stage.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
We are
Hi, everybody.
So grateful for your time. I feel like over the last, StartGrind started 10 years ago this month, but
congratulations.
Thank you.
It's huge.
But really, it's been the last 8 years we've really sort of focused on building it. And I've had so many conversations about community with people, and the Reddit community is I think one of these ones that just always comes up again and again and again as one of the very best, most important communities in the world. Couple of quick stats: 430 million users. This is as of last year. 200 million posts on Reddit last year. 1.7 billion comments. 32 billion upvotes, and 100,000 active communities. Wow. You can clap for that. Clapping in my head. What does community mean to you? What is it? It's such this big nebulous thing. Tell us what it means to you.
I mean, I think even community on Reddit as a thing is a nebulous idea. It's something we spend a lot of time thinking about and trying to understand. In fact, I think these days of our work as less of that of product people or it's tech people and engineers, and more of that of like anthropologists trying to kind of understand this thing that's Reddit, this like living organism that's Reddit and the community behind it. When we started Reddit, which was almost 15 years ago, it'll be 15 years this summer, we had this vague idea that we wanted to build. There's kind of two ideas bouncing around in our head. One was a place where people can find new and interesting things online. And in that era, it was just links. We were just links to stuff. And we didn't have subreddits. We didn't have communities on Reddit. So a place where people can find new and interesting things. And then I wanted to have the community feel of Slashdot, which was a website / community that I was a part of for a long time. But if you had asked me then, like, what is a community, I don't know what I would have said, because I don't know if I'd be able to articulate it. It's even now a difficult concept, I think, to articulate. But it's one of those things, it's kind of like the word like soul, right? Like, I conceptually kind of know what a soul is, but it's like hard to articulate it. And so I think a community is like it's a group with a soul. Or maybe that's what I would have said then. I think I can be a little bit more precise now. But suffice to say, I think it's a big concept, even for us who think about it every day.
When did the soul of Reddit start to come together?
Well, the soul of Reddit, I think actually this is, when I look back on our time, we've done some things right and a lot of things wrong. I think one of the things we actually had, I don't want to say figured out, but stumbled upon early was, Reddit always had a soul from like almost day one. At least call it like day 60. We faked all of our traffic for the first 2 months, so maybe it didn't count quite yet. But once we had users, we had a soul. And in fact, it's funny, I haven't used the word soul to describe Reddit in a really long time, but I remember 15 years ago I used to talk about that a lot. Because I would talk about Dig, who was our biggest competitor in that era. They were about 5 times bigger than us. And I remember one of the things that was frustrating to me is I was like, that company has no soul. Was just like this pejorative I'd throw around that like was meaningless to anybody. But anyway, it's this I guess, coming back now.
Do you you know have worked in several startups? I'm sure have advised a lot of companies and things. Like, at what point should a startup start thinking about actually creating the soul? I mean, does it lie in the founders? Is it sort of tied to the values? Is it like where does it, like, in the hierarchy of things that you need to do and figure out, where does that sort of fit?
I think it's a really interesting question, but although my answer, I've never been asked it before, so I'll just think in real time here. I'm not sure it's something that you can manufacture. Like, wake up one day and say, okay, our Q1 OKR is to have a soul. Like, that feels a little off to me. And so, but I do see this in the companies that I've been a part of. I see this in companies that I'm close to, whether it's friends companies or even our customers, our advertisers. Definitely I can tell when I'm talking to a brand that, in my opinion, has a soul versus doesn't, because the conversation's really different. And so I think I might ask an adjacent question, which is, what is the mission of your company? What is the purpose of your company? Why are you working on this thing? And your answer might tell you something, or it might tell me something, certainly, because I know people who start companies and their purpose is to make money, and they find that motivating, and that's what they're doing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se, but I do think it might mean their relationship with the business is maybe a little bit more impersonal than mine is with Reddit, for example.
Yeah, if the soul is, or the community is, like, sort of the soul or the essence of what is the product or the customers that use it or something, maybe, yeah, it's like maybe the sort of the fabric, the makeup of the people that are doing it, and sort of how they sort of interact together and work together, or how the product makes their life better, or yeah, it's an interesting way. I haven't really heard it described that way.
Well, it's certainly the question I ask whenever I'm meeting entrepreneurs, whether socially or more formally, is, why are you working on this? And because that helps me understand. It's a values question, really. And I think whether I'm meeting an entrepreneur or even like recruiting somebody, it just helps me understand, like, do I relate to this person?
Yeah.
But I do think it kind of gets back to this idea of what's the soul of your company, and from there maybe we're talking about what's the community around it.
So you have 100,000, more than this because these numbers are a few months old, but you announced the end of last year in your metrics reporting that you share publicly that you had 100,000 active communities, which is just staggering. Like, what metrics inside of that are important health indicators for you as to active? Obviously, like, probably means there's people using it at certain intervals that are acceptable to be deemed active, but, like, what does actually a healthy community inside of Reddit look like?
It's funny, you've used a lot of words in there that are important to us that maybe you didn't even realize. One, you said, like, these are your public numbers, and that's totally true, because when we think about the numbers we operationalize on, our internal numbers, those are always changing. And we do have operational numbers, like metrics that we track around active communities, but we have an internal definition of what an active community is. For a while, we actually had an internal definition, or tried to have a definition of what a healthy community was. Actually, I think we switched the word from healthy to active because it was a little less judgy. So anyway, there's all sorts of, I think this is actually really hard. The numbers that we care about on the surface are users, communities, revenue, but those are really output metrics. And there's all sorts of things that feed into those. And we can start getting into quality versus quantity. And long story short, I think metrics are really important, but they're only one side of the story. Right? They're really what we're trying to capture with metrics, whether they're internal or external, is we're trying to give people a sense of the direction we're going, or give a sense of what's important to us. But it's really easy, I think, at a company, and a lot of companies make this mistake of, chasing a number just for the number's sake and losing track of the reason for doing so. And we can fall into that trap as well, right? We can increase users, I have no doubt, but are they, they're good users? Are they contributing to our communities? Are they, are they clicking on ads? Are they not clicking on ads? Are they creating content? Are they, misbehaving? Are they just, consuming video and, I don't know, whatever. There's like all sorts of users that make them more or less valuable or, good or bad in our opinion. So there's always I think a kind of metrics behind the metrics.
I've heard other founders talk about this, and you just touched on it, that every startup has these unique metrics to what they're doing. Like Airbnb would have some very unique metrics around their business that probably nobody else even knows how to value. But for them, it ties into really important things. And I think what you're saying is, and is a good lesson here for people that are just starting. You probably have metrics that people aren't used to evaluating or ways of looking at it, and maybe that ties into your engagement or that ties into your usage. And it's okay to be unique to you. It's okay if it doesn't fit inside of a Google Analytics dashboard or something.
Well, absolutely, and I think it's also okay for them to change. We spent time thinking about over the years, visits in a day, time on site, time in specific communities, time in communities of a certain size, votes, commenting rate, length of comments. Like there's all sorts of stuff that we've been dancing around, this idea of, is Reddit getting bigger and healthier? But I guess bigger is an easy word, but healthier, what does that mean? And I think more importantly, the questions we're asking ourselves are, as it relates to, for example, community growth, what are the signs that a community is going to grow up into being a healthy, self-sustaining, interesting community, or not? Can we identify that early? And that's not quite as clear, right? Because obviously those numbers, the quantity numbers, the size numbers just aren't there yet. We're talking about something that's by definition small, so there are other indicators. And we spend a lot of time thinking about that, and we're always, I think, tweaking our metrics.
That'd be something I think really interesting for, at least for me and my startup, like to hear what you all, like the research you have around how to build active, healthy communities. Like that'd be something I'd be very interested in learning from, and probably a lot of other people. Do you think 100,000 communities? Do you know, like, is there a TAM for total communities? Like, are there 1 million communities out there? Are there 10 million? I mean, I don't know. Are there? Do you have any idea?
I think the way I think about it is every person needs community. Community is like I think a
Why do you say that?
It's a basic need for humans. We are a social species. We build things together. We help each other. We collaborate. It's one of the things that I think separates humans from the rest of the animal kingdom. And therefore, and everybody in the world belongs to at least one community, by geography, and probably many more based on interests and passions and friends and family. And so therefore, I think every person has communities in their lives, needs communities in their lives, and I believe then that everybody in the world can be a Reddit user if our product is community. Now, how many communities is that actually? I don't know. It's a lot more than 100,000. But we'll start there and work our way out. You did say something that I actually think is really relevant to this audience, which is one of the things we've been thinking a lot about is what helps a small community survive. Why do some communities on Reddit thrive and most die? And one of the things we've learned is that the creators of the community, the first moderators, the founders, actually have a disproportionate influence. Maybe the only thing that matters. There's some right place at the right time there, but really it's the creators. And so I think that's probably true of businesses as well, which is, there's some right place, right time, like be building a company in the right market, but probably more than anything else it's the founders. It's the people who are taking that idea from 0 to 1 that are truly important. Because I've seen great founders make a good business out of a bad idea, and I've seen bad founders, just ruin great ideas. And so really, I think it comes down to the people.
Do you think that every community in the world can live on Reddit? Is there a space? Is that even necessary, or?
It's definitely not necessary. And no, I don't think every community can live on Reddit, nor does it need to.
Yeah.
Right. For example, Reddit isn't used, and I don't know if it ever will be used for families or for groups of close friends. People use messaging apps for those, or they use, that other massive social network. I think there's many ways for people to interact, and I think products kind of fill, kind of specific needs within that. Certainly, the market size for Reddit is huge. I think it's everybody in the world, but it doesn't have to be every community in the world. No.
Yeah. What's interesting too is more. We see this in the research. We see this in consumer trends of people are trusting what they read online less and less every single day, and with all the disinformation that is online, they have a good reason to do that. It feels to me like that Reddit, for some reason, which you probably have the answer, I'd like to hear your explanation of it. Reddit has found this way of sort of maintaining authenticity and sort of it's so interesting because it's user generated, but there's I have a higher level of trust going there than I do going to many different professional media outlet sites that their whole job is to just write about the news. And so I wonder why do you think do I have that right, and is my perception correct, and then why has Reddit been able to sort of maintain, I think, a higher level of trust than a lot of other sites?
I think you do have it right. According to Pew, we are the most trusted source of news for millennials. And as for how, I'll give you a nebulous answer and then maybe a more specific one. The nebulous answer is we didn't go out of our way to lose that trust, which was actually kind of one of the founding ideas within Reddit. Both from a product point of view and kind of content moderation point of view, we didn't do anything or build anything unless we had a reason for doing so. And so this in the early days meant we didn't over-categorize. We didn't try to force everything into a neat category. We didn't have an editorial voice that we were trying to maintain. We didn't choose the news, right? Reddit was the idea was users would choose the news, and they would do the ranking. My co-founder Alexis used to joke, one of our early ads, I don't know if it was an ad because I guess just only put it on t-shirts, but was freedom from the press. And I still feel that way, which is we created Reddit in an era that's only gotten worse, where we just felt like everybody was lying to us. Right, the media was lying to us, the news was lying to us, politicians were lying to us. Our parents specifically, actually, that's where.
My mom's actually watching, so I'm just that. She's actually.
But
watching.
We do tend to pick up new users when they're towards the end of high school and college. Right, when they start to develop their own worldviews. The mechanics of Reddit are, we're a reputation platform. Right? Our communities have their rules, they have their values. Every user through upvotes and downvotes can enforce those rules and values. They can choose what's important to them. They can reject behaviors that aren't acceptable. And through that, I think actually higher quality answers come out, whether we're talking about news or reviews or advice, whatever it is. And this is why at Reddit we have actually even in today's political climate, an optimistic view of humanity and of the world. And I think much more so than maybe, I think we tend to give people more credit than the average person does. Because what I've learned from Reddit, and actually this is one of the things I'm most thankful about in Reddit, is that it's taught me that people, all people, are more interesting and collaborative and funny and supportive than I think we give them credit for. And what really matters is the context, right? rode down here just a moment ago from San Francisco. 101 was super crowded, and it's easy to look at everybody else and think, you all are assholes. And you're going to make me late. And I don't know why you would do that, but you are. And then those very same people might actually be you, for all I know. Lovely, interesting people who have plenty of interesting things to share. And we have plenty of things in common. And so I think that context really, really matters. And I think Reddit's really good at putting people in a context to behave better.
I think that, that sort of early vision and the very authentic vision, it's very hard as a founder because you see all these different things. You see somebody being successful with something, you're like, oh shoot, I should just copy what they're doing, even though it's maybe not exactly who I am or what we are, but like it's hot right now, so I'm gonna do it. But I remember when the whole Digg, you said it, and I've heard you talk about this in other interviews, but Digg was 5 times bigger, was there and had all this momentum, and then, I remember speaking with some of the very important members of that team as they were making changes, and they were like, we just don't care. Literally, I've heard them say this, we don't care what the users think. We're going to do this, and they're going to do what we want them to do. And they sort of, if they had a soul before, whether you said they didn't, it was definitely gone then. And you all, really like kept that authenticity, and and it was there in the beginning. It was there when, you're growing slowly, and then as your growth started to take off, it's sort of maintained.
Yeah, and there were, the funny thing about Digg is they started about 6 months before us, but we didn't know that. And so we had the good fortune of building Reddit based on our own first principles, even though the products were similar, certainly at first glance. It's really easy to copy a feature. It's, copy the pixels. It's hard to copy the decision-making framework that led to a feature.
Sure.
And the philosophy behind it. And so I think it's challenging. Not impossible, but challenging. And I will admit, though, there was certainly a time where, we started, we're only a year or so younger than Facebook. We're older than Twitter and YouTube and Insta and TikTok and I don't know, whatever, these other platforms. And I remember for a while watching, Twitter, explode past us and YouTube explode past us and Insta explode past us. And I remember just thinking, like, what are we doing wrong? And obviously, there's actually, turns out, a lot of stuff we were doing wrong. But I was also wondering, is this like, are we just, like, are our values just out of sync? Like, we've made all of these trade-offs in favor of, authenticity or privacy and I remember thinking, like, just people just don't care. And this, like, influencer celebrity stuff that I'm just, like, allergic to, other people just really, really into it. And maybe we're just, like, this corner of the internet of these, like, idealistic weirdos.
Off the small 430 million of you.
Yeah, right. Well, we weren't that big then. And what's made me really happy is that I think we've done our best to not compromise on those values, and things like privacy and authenticity and community that have been important to us for a really long time are now important. And so it feels like actually the market's coming to us a little bit in that regard. And so I'm glad we didn't copy those other platforms or copy their features. And I'm sure we did here or there, but they didn't work because it doesn't fit our platform. And so, I think it's been overall, I think, much more fulfilling to have kind of stayed on our path and tried to kind of figure out how to do things the Reddit way.
You, talking about community, we've talked about online community. You also have a bunch of IRL and offline community programs at huge scale. You have the Reddit Gifts program, the largest gift exchange in the world. I've got friends that have been part of this, and I have watched this over the years and just been amazed at the whole thing, that it works. It's kind of like Airbnb. It's like, first half is like, I don't know, people staying in your house. Like, I don't know, people exchanging gifts that don't know each other, but it actually, like, really touches people's lives, some of the gifts that people, exchange and the stories behind them. getting your moderators in person. How do you look at community from a face-to-face versus versus digital perspective? How does that play into Reddit?
Well, I think the first thing in there is like, why do these things work? And it goes back to the previous point, that I was trying to make, which is that like things work when we give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think the fact that like we are here, like as a species, suggests that we should give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. And I've been just overwhelmed and humbled and surprised and delighted at watching people, our users, but really we're just talking about people, do really incredible things for for each other. And so the difference between online communities and offline communities, this is actually something we are actively trying to better understand. I think there's a lot of qualities of offline communities that we can learn from. Because we've kind of stumbled into this, the community work that we're doing. And as I said, like, we started off as product and tech people, and now I feel like anthropologists. And so there's a lot for us to learn. But even the line between offline and online is really blurry. For example, I'm a member of a dinner group. There's about a half a dozen of us that get dinner once a month. And I mean, that sounds like an offline community, except we spend way more time texting each other than we do talking at dinner. And so I don't know, is that an online community or an offline community? I think it's a lot of our communities on Reddit, not just the stuff that we do with Secret Santa and our meetups and the moderator stuff, but a lot of our communities meet up on their own. Are those online communities or offline communities? And so I think that the qualities of both are really important. That people have some shared interest and passion, they have some shared values. There's a kind of an idea of being a member of that community or not. I think those concepts work across the digital divide, as they say.
It feels to me like a lot of the successful people that we've had that I've been able to meet or interview over the years, Startup Grind, like a lot of their success is just wrapped around how long they were able to just sort of last and survive. And I look at you and thinking, I know you've worked at Reddit for a long time, you've done some other things, you've come back, but 15 years on one idea is especially in our industry is a pretty long time. So I wonder, like, how do you still sort of, like, are you still as excited about it today? I know you're the CEO. I mean, you're going to say, even if you weren't, you'd say you were. So don't answer that question. But
I am actually,
I'm sure you're really
to
excited.
my core, more excited than I ever have been. And I'll tell you why. Can I tell you why?
You can.
I think
Yes,
there's
go
a
ahead.
helpful answer in here for folks. If there was one criticism I could give myself 15 years ago, if there's only one, there are plenty I could give. If there's only one, and actually I was given this criticism a lot, is that we didn't think big enough. I always felt like our company was like we had one more day. And so we just kind of, our planning horizon was one day. Every day I was like, wow, this is way more successful. This is like when we had like 1,000 users. I was like, we have 1,000 users. I thought we were going to have 2 users. So like, this is amazing, and we've made it. And that's why we sold the company so early, is because we didn't have a vision for Reddit. And my motivation wasn't any of the lofty stuff that I talk about now. It was, I don't want to look stupid in front of Paul Graham. And so I'm way more excited about Reddit now than I was 15 years ago, because even though we're big now, the opportunity is even bigger. We were talking about having every user on the platform, and my belief is that if Reddit puts people in a context to behave better, and if everybody in the world was on Reddit, then everybody in the world would be behaving better, then we've done something really special. And that makes me really excited. So yeah, I'm actually more excited today than I was 10 years ago, than 15 years ago. And I think it's really fun to kind of think about that and give yourself something big to chase. So,
And if you're talking to an entrepreneur who's been working on the same idea a long time and who is struggling to get a lot of traction, does think it's something that's worth continuing on with, how do you power through some of those weeks and days and months where things look bleak, but maybe it's just some sort of temporary clouds until you get to where you are now 15 years later?
Honestly, I think that's one of the hardest questions in business. And it's as a founder, you need the ego to proceed when everybody is telling you to stop, but the humility to quit before you spend your whole life on something that's not going to work. And I think that's really challenging. And so this is, I think, actually a great opportunity to get advice from friends and from, smart people in your life who can, kind of see a little bit more than you might be able to. We went through this at Hipmunk. That company, Hipmunk lasted, I was with it for the first 5 years. I think we sold after 6 or so. That was not a good business. And my co-founder, Adam, and I could not see that. We were like, we built a good product. We use this product every day. People, they tell us they love our product. They shut it down like 2 weeks ago. I'm super sad about it. And our organic traffic was always on a vector to 0. And, we were able to grind it out and through marketing and trickery and deals here or there, but I think the fundamentals weren't there. And so I don't have a great answer for you other than I can tell you I've lived it. It's really hard because not every business, not every product is going to be a massive success, even if it's good. But it's our investors, I think, were telling us that actually, maybe not quite as succinctly. Or maybe we just weren't listening. That's actually more likely. So, hard question. You have to, I think, listen. My advice is listen to the smart people in your life. Look at the data and see if are you just lying to yourself?
Steve Huffman, co-founder and CEO of Reddit, thank you for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
How about that for the power of community? Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your insights. Did everyone love Startup Grind Global 2020? Yeah? All right. Well, listen, I'd love to welcome back to the stage Derek to share some incredible closing remarks. This is kind of the part you don't really want to miss. I know there are some people kind of looking to get into the side, so grab some seats on the side. And if I can welcome back to the stage, Derek Anderson.
Are you not staying out? Stay out here, Finn. Why is everyone leaving? I come back and you all leave? Don't leave. Dude in the orange shirt, sit down, man. Why are you leaving? What's the deal? Thank you. All right. Finn, where'd you go?
Come back, come back.
You're all wearing dark clothes. I can't call any. Woman with the very curly hair. Why you walk out the door? Don't do that. Come back. All right.
No, I saw someone with a flag. What's the flag that you?
Hey, can we give it up for the most amazing MC? Look, I'll be honest, he's a little high maintenance. I mean, we have to fly him in from the UK.
Still economy.
Green room's got to be perfect. Those green M&M stuff. But Finn was our original chapter director in Edinburgh, Scotland, and just was so amazing. And we had to bring him on the team, and he's so much better at being up here on stage than I am, that everyone's like, Derek, if you could please stop going on stage as little as possible, and we could have Finn just take all of that time, we would appreciate it. So Finn, wonderful job. You're incredible. Thank you for being up here for 2 days. So we like to do a little exercise at the end of these events, and that is just to hear what you learned. So I'd love to hear, just give me 5 or 10 seconds. Raise your hand. We've got a couple mic runners. Just really quick. Let's move around the room really, really fast. What'd you learn? Tell me. Give me a hand. Nobody learned anything last 2 days. You completely wasted your time being here. Yes. Don't leave early.
Be very attentive to who you're listening to.
Okay. Be careful with who you listen to. I think that's great advice. All right. What else? Who else?
Feel free to put up your hand and we'll get mics to you.
Don't be so married to your ideas that you're not able to iterate.
Yeah. Good. Yes.
Yeah, just to add to that point, always make sure you listen to the feedback from your target market and elders, other people. because what I've learned is most people are outwardly humble, meaning they pay lip service to being humble, but they're inwardly stubborn. So when people give you advice, you're like, oh, I'll do that, but then you don't actually do it. So that's something I learned.
Okay.
So please believe the power of the community.
Believe in the power of community. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, you hear literally Steve's built one of the biggest, best communities in the whole world, and he's talking about how that was at the core of what they've been doing for 15 years. And now it's obvious now, right? It's so obvious. But yeah, of course, you should take care of your customers and build things authentically, but trust in that, and it'll pay off in the long term.
Be nice, talk to people around you, because you never know what kind of connection
Yeah.
you're going to make.
That's great advice. That's great advice. We did this exercise in the morning. We had somebody just speak to whoever's next to them, and somebody came up to me and told me later that there was someone that was like senior partnership person at like a very big technology company. This thing in front of them was like exactly who they needed to talk to, and thankfully they had spoken to that person. They would have never met them. Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of actionable advice for real problems in my own business.
Okay, great. Yeah.
The DocSend presentation was pretty amazing. The advice that you get on pitches feels like it's a lot of fluff a lot of times, but it's amazing what they're doing. They're breaking down exactly what slides they're looking at, what's successful, what's not. Just really changed my eyes on the way that we would approach pitch decks overall.
Great. Who's ever got the mic? Go for it.
Never limit yourself on how far you can go.
Very nice.
Great. Go ahead in the cheap seats. Yeah, you could kind of see that he's like any of us. Like he's a real human being, and he's taking this stuff really seriously. But when you're helping 98% of your customers, and 2% of them aren't satisfied, and they didn't pay anything, I mean, I was giving him high fives. Like, he should feel great about what he's doing. Keep doing it.
Take the gentleman in the black T-shirt over there. Desperate to say.
CEOs and all these important people are just as human as we are and as approachable.
Very true. Love it. Tony, well, chapter director this side.
Yeah, help others before you help yourself.
Startup Grind Values. Love it.
Something great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the most important part that we're all missing is what an amazing job Startup Grind is doing connecting all the founders from all over the world. It's a round of applause for you guys, for each of you who's wearing a red shirt, and all the chapter directors from all over US and all over the world. You guys do an amazing job.
Are you a chapter director?
I'm not.
Matt, we need to get you to
Should
launch
be.
a chapter, man.
Thank you.
You're our kind of person, for sure.
You'll get
Thank
your $100 later.
Go ahead.
Care about what you do, and because later on you need to extract energy from when you don't think you can, so you will be able to power yourself to do what you want.
Thank you. All right, anybody else?
Yeah, me. I'm from Venezuela, so this is my first
Venezuela
time
in
in the
the
United States. So after I met all these amazing people, I realized that we, the startup founders, we're going to be the people that we're going to save humanity and the world. And Startup Grind is a great way to how we can spread the word so we can change the world forever.
Thank you. I saw in a report last night, I saw in a tweet that this is a little bit of a downer, but I'm going to bring it back up, but that entrepreneurship is at a 40-year low right now. 40-year low. Can you imagine? Can you imagine with all the problems and all the things the world is facing? I know we're immersed in it in the technology industry, but in the last 40 years, it's never been lower. I can't imagine a better time to be in a startup than right now. And so, kudos to everybody in this room who's either thinking about it or helping startups or in a startup or thinking about doing a startup or as a student who wants to figure out how to do it. It's now becoming, I hope it isn't cool to be in a startup anymore because it means there's more opportunities for the people that are here in this room. So it shocks me, but we're all on the cutting edge of things, and we're not following a trend. I mean, we're in technology, we're in startups. Like, people don't want to do startups. Great, let's go against the current, and I think we'll end up seeing, that we're actually the ones that are going to create the future versus, people that aren't willing to take the risk to do it. So
love that. And like, we have chapters all over the world, 125 countries, I believe. We got a lot of our chapter directors here. We'll be calling up them on stage shortly. Feel free to kind of visit a lot of those local chapters. And of course, next year, who's interested in coming back next year? Well, you'll definitely be here, but
We next year we'll be hosting. We're going to be here in Redwood City again. We're going to be on February 23rd and 24th. We're going to move it back a couple of weeks so you can spend Valentine's Day with your startup team. And but we're just so grateful for, first of all, the city of Redwood City for hosting us, being incredible hosts, shutting down many, many streets for us. The police, the fire crews, the staff of the Fox Theater, the people that clean up the trash, the people that put up the lights, that set up the tents. Those tents aren't usually in the middle of the street, as you can imagine, but we're so grateful for all of you. If we could give it up for the city of Redwood City, well deserved. A huge thanks to, what, y'all are leaving now? What, just because I'm thanking people you don't, guy in the shiny black and white backpack, woman with the bag on your shoulder, you're leaving right now. We're all, don't do it. You can turn back. It's okay.
We still love you, though.
She's like, I'm not coming back next year. Makes fun of me on stage. Look, the production team, the AV team, the people that set up all the booths, all of the sponsors, all of the startups, the Startup Grind team that literally works. We start working on this tomorrow morning. We start planning for next year. Huge thanks to these people. They've been working for about 5 or 6 straight days, all day, 6 to 9 p.m. to make this event possible. Thank you so much for all that you do. Bring everybody up?
Yeah. All right.
We'd like to bring up all the Startup Grind chapter directors and all the teams. Come on up on stage as we close out.
Let's give them a massive kind of round of applause. This is our community.
Our community is only possible with these people. Thank you for being here.
How you
We'll
doing?
see you next year. Keep grinding. Thank you.
Aha, buddy, how are you? You good?
Hey, man, you can give me a hug? How you doing, buddy?
How was your sessions?
Who? Thanks, buddy. Hey.
Bye.